If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 1. No, I refuse. London, England, 1938. The sky in London was as overcast as usual. Wool's Orphanage. Room 201. Thud. The heavy wardrobe gently fell to the ground from the air. The 358th manipulation experiment is complete, which fully proves one point: the stronger my will, the more focused my mind, the greater and more precise the power I can control. Perhaps this power is a kind of idealistic force. Wade looked at the small notebook in his hand, which was filled with words, then added a sentence with his broken pencil at the back. After multiple experiments, I still cannot confirm the source or scientific principles of this power, and I still cannot determine whether anyone else possesses this ability. Wade closed the small notebook, along with the half-broken pencil, and put it into his pocket. All right, the manipulation experiment has reached its limit for now. Next, let's start the second stage of the restoration experiment, Wade said as he pulled a chair full of cracks from the side of the bed. Wade raised his hand and lightly patted the chair, then the chair immediately shattered into pieces, scattered all over the floor, as if its previous state had only been roughly glued together with cheap glue, not solid at all. He looked at the scattered pieces on the floor, then solemnly extended his right hand, once again focusing his mind. Restore. As soon as the words were spoken, the scattered pieces on the ground slowly began to move, like a video being rewound. They slowly pieced themselves together and turned back into a chair. The cracks on the chair remained, but upon closer inspection, the cracks seemed fewer than before. Wade took out a rope and compared it to the longest crack on the chair. Hat. A smile of delight appeared on his face because he noticed that this crack was shorter than it had been during the last restoration. Wade took out his notebook again and began to record. As expected, this power can be completely used to restore objects. It hasn't been fully restored yet, simply because I haven't fully mastered this power. However, as my control over this power steadily improves, the restoration effects are getting better and better. After the moment of joy, Wade looked at his palm. A trace of melancholy, not belonging to his age, appeared on his young face. Although this power was magical and had endless potential for development, if given a choice, he would still prefer to stay in his original time. Yes, Wade was a transmigrator from another world. A week ago, when he was conducting an experiment in his own laboratory and was about to reach the most crucial step, he suddenly lost consciousness. When he awoke, he found himself here, and his body had mysteriously regressed to around 11 years old. The most critical thing was that he discovered he seemed to have developed a special ability to easily influence other things. It wasn't until he was sent to the orphanage as an orphan that he fully accepted this absurd reality and quickly learned about the basic situation of this world. It turned out that this place was England in the 1930s. More specifically, he was now in London, England, in 1938. 1938 was not a good year, because a failed art student would soon start a world war, and London would be reduced to rubble in that war. The crisis was approaching, and Wade felt that the strange power he had gained might become his support. Moreover, he had been curious about this mysterious and peculiar power for quite some time. Thus, Wade quickly began practicing and experimenting with this power. So far, the progress had been very smooth. Unknowingly, Wade, immersed in his work, had quietly passed his first week in this era. Wade took a short break, then dismantled the chair again, preparing to continue with the second experiment as planned. The war was approaching, and he didn't have much time left. Bang! Suddenly, the tightly closed door was violently kicked open. The wooden door slammed hard against the wall, making a loud crash. Wade furrowed his brows and looked up. He saw a boy standing outside the door, about the same age as himself. The boy had black hair and could be considered quite handsome. He seemed like someone who would easily win others over, of course, if his skin weren't so pale, and his gaze so cold and sinister. "Looks like you're the new kid they were talking about," the boy said as he sized up Wade, his voice soft but carrying an inexplicable arrogance. "Not much to note, really. So, how did you manage to get that old woman to give you the best single room? Was it because of that pretty face of yours?" Wade calmly looked at the boy. "Your knocking style is truly unique." Due to his previous profession, Wade's manners were always very good, so communication was naturally no problem. "You seem a bit unconvinced?" "A week ago, there was a fool who wasn't too convinced either," the boy said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "But that night, I hung his pet rabbit from the rafters." "Oh. Wade noticed the boy's somewhat sickly smile. So, does doing that bring you pleasure? Pleasure? No, I do it just to make them fear me, the boy slowly walked into the room. Only by making people fear you will they obey you, follow your orders. And I've never liked it when others defy my will. I see so, may I ask, what does the gentleman in front of me, who wishes for others to fear him, want me to do? Wade said with a hint of interest as he looked at the boy. At first, Wade had thought this boy might have some psychological issues, perhaps enjoying torturing small animals, a type of child not uncommon in an orphanage. But now, it seemed the reality was a bit different. Seeing that Wade might be willing to give in, the boy couldn't help but show a smug smile. I've asked Mrs. Cole many times to move into this room but she always kept me in that dark, damp room on the first floor, the boy spoke while staring intently into Wade's eyes. Wade nodded. I see. So, you're planning to swap rooms with me. You're much smarter than those fools, the boy said, pleased to see that Wade understood his meaning so quickly. In fact, if it weren't for that old woman Cole locking me in the small dark room for an entire week because of a rabbit, I would have come to you sooner. Wade nodded again. I completely understand. No one wants to stay in a dark, damp place. So, you agree? The boy asked eagerly. No, I refuse. Chapter 2, Tom Riddle. The boy stared at Wade with a dark expression. This guy had wasted so many words with him, and in the end, he was directly rejected. So are you messing with me? Wade waved his hand. No, I'm not messing with you. I did seriously consider your proposal, and I completely agree with your theory on fear. However, I must be blunt, you haven't demonstrated the ability to make me feel fear. So, I naturally have no reason to follow your wishes. After all, I don't have any pets like rabbits. The boy closed his mouth, and in his pitch-black eyes, there seemed to be a flash of scarlet light. Wade's words, to him, were undoubtedly filled with mockery. If you don't have anything else to say, then please leave. I still need to fix the door lock you broke, Wade said calmly, issuing the dismissal. You're provoking me, but one thing you got right, lack of ability indeed means not being able to instill fear in others. So what makes you think I don't have that ability? The boy stared at Wade, his voice cold and mocking, his entire presence like a venomous snake eyeing its prey. Wade was about to say something when suddenly, he noticed that the pieces of the chair he had thrown on the ground were slowly floating up into the air. He was sure he hadn't done that. I see, so this is your trump card. Wade looked at the floating pieces, his eyes flashing with surprise and understanding. Clearly, there was indeed someone in this world who had this special ability, just like him. And that person was right in front of him. The boy noticed that Wade didn't show the panic he had expected, and a slight doubt crept into his heart. However, that little bit of doubt was not enough to stop him from wanting to teach Wade a lesson. The next moment, the floating pieces in the air were hurled fiercely toward Wade. If it had been any other child, seeing such a bizarre scene would certainly have frightened them. However, Wade was no ordinary child. In fact, after hundreds of experiments and thousands of practice sessions, Wade felt that the boy's control over this ability was rather childish. Wade made no extra moves, nor did he look at the flying pieces. Instead, he quietly watched the boy, as if observing an excellent specimen. Whoosh! 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 The flying pieces abruptly stopped in front of Wade, unable to move any further. There was no doubt that his control over this strange power was indeed superior to the boy's. The boy looked on, stunned, his face filled with shock. What happened? How can you actually do it too? No. This is impossible. How can this be? How could you possibly do it? This was supposed to be something only I could. Why do you think you're the only special one? Wade said, looking at the boy with mockery. The boy's proud heart was deeply wounded by that look. So are we the same kind of people? Same kind, hey? No, I'm not like you. You possess such a special talent, but I haven't noticed any signs of practice on you. You wouldn't just be using this power to scare ordinary people with such a boring thing, would you? If that's the case, then it must be a sad waste to have such a special ability in your hands. Wade waved his hand, and the pieces of the chair fell to the ground with a loud clattering noise. The boy glared at Wade, his eyes burning with anger. You do have a special ability, just like me, but that doesn't mean you can do this in front of me, you ass. Bang! The next moment, the boy suddenly found himself on the ground, not knowing how it happened. Though nothing was on his back, he couldn't move an inch. It felt as though an invisible hand was pressing him down hard into the ground. Wade slowly walked over to him, looking down at him from above. "What did you just say?" The boy looked up at Wade's old cloth shoes with shock and anger, unable to lift his head. "Nothing, I didn't say anything." The immobile body, coupled with the invisible pressure on his back that seemed to grow heavier, filled him with unease. "I can feel the scent of fear coming from you. So according to your theory, shouldn't you be listening to me now?" Wade's gentle voice came from above, but to the boy's ears, it sounded like a devil's whisper. The boy nodded slowly, his eyes now much clearer. Then, he suddenly felt an immense lightness, and the overwhelming pressure that had been on him disappeared without a trace. "Good, I like obedient people," Wade said as he pulled the boy up from the ground and kindly brushed off the dust from his clothes. "By the way, I still don't know your name." The boy gasped for breath, still shaken by what had just happened. The heavy pressure, he could clearly feel that Wade could easily kill him if he wanted to. "Riddle, my name is Tom Riddle." Ding! Host has made contact with the future Dark Lord. The merit system is now activated. Ding! Host has thoroughly taught a bad little boy a lesson, reward, 50 merit points. Wade. Tom Riddle? The future Dark Lord? The merit system. I see Tom Riddle. Wade carefully re-examined the boy in front of him, who was named Tom Riddle. Tom felt uneasy under the sudden change in Wade's gaze. Although he could become the Dark Lord, feared and powerful in the future, he was just a brat who had been thoroughly beaten into submission for now. And he really didn't want to die. So, with Wade, who seemed capable of taking his life at any moment, the fear Tom felt was indescribable. At that moment, Tom suddenly felt a weight on his shoulder. It was Wade's hand, placed casually on him. Cold sweat instantly poured down Tom's forehead. "Don't worry, Tom, I just think your name sounds a little familiar." The name did sound familiar. The combination of the Dark Lord and the name Tom Riddle already explained a lot. It was at this moment that Wade recalled two key pieces of information that he had been ignoring until now. First, this orphanage was called Wool's Orphanage, and the headmistress was Mrs. Cole. Without a doubt, this was the birthplace of the second-generation Dark Lord, Tom Riddle. So, Wade finally understood that he had directly crossed into the world of Harry Potter, even though the plot of the story wouldn't begin for several more decades. Which meant the strange power he possessed wasn't some special ability, but magic. Chapter 3, Dark Lord and Good Deeds. Tom stood in front of Wade, feeling like he was being pricked by needles all over. The psychological pressure Wade was putting on him was simply too much. He carefully glanced at Wade's expression. "Perhaps my name is too common, lots of people are called Tom, so you find my name familiar." As Tom spoke, a trace of disgust flashed in his eyes. He wasn't lying on this point, he truly disliked his mediocre name. Because he had always thought of himself as extraordinary, someone with special talents, not like those ordinary people, even if they also happened to be called Tom. So, using the same name as those stupid people made him feel disgusted just thinking about it. An ordinary name doesn't matter, Tom. If you become powerful enough, terrifying enough, then your name will naturally become a taboo. A name that no one dares to speak out loud, can it still be considered ordinary? Tom watched as Wade removed his hand from his shoulder, and he couldn't help but swallow hard. In front of Wade, he felt completely exposed. This sensation of being easily seen through made him feel both terrified and angry. However, making his name a taboo? Tom carefully considered Wade's words, his pupils gradually narrowing, and even his breathing became slightly more rapid. Is it really possible? Without a doubt, Wade's words made Tom's heart race. Moreover, he suddenly felt that using his rare talent to bully ordinary people was indeed beneath him. No wonder Wade had such contempt for him. However, since Wade had been able to improve his abilities through practice, why couldn't he? In Tom's eyes, the reason he had lost face in front of Wade today was simply because he hadn't practiced his abilities enough. As long as he put in the effort, he didn't believe he couldn't surpass this show-off in front of him. Just wait, when the time comes, I'll definitely kill. Tom lowered his head slightly, his eyes flashing. He was thinking about how to deal with Wade, his gaze cautiously glancing at Wade. Just then, he caught sight of Wade's half-smiling, half-amused expression, and his heart suddenly tightened. Damn! What does that look mean? Why does it feel like he knows exactly what I'm thinking? No, that's impossible. Tom had no idea that Wade, as a transmigrator, knew more about Tom's history than Tom himself did. So, understanding his thoughts was the easiest thing for Wade. Wade's face broke into a smile again, and he said gently, "Don't worry Tom, my name is quite ordinary too. I'm called Wade Reynolds. Of course, I don't mind if you just call me Wade. But I really mind if you call me Tom." Tom shouted angrily in his mind, while struggling to maintain a composed expression, trying to make himself appear more submissive. It seemed he was naturally good at hiding his true feelings. This was all a misunderstanding, Wade I mean, sir. Tom ultimately didn't dare to call Wade by his first name directly. Though he kept telling himself that Wade was just putting on an act, that damn sense of oppression coming from him made the current Tom feel powerless. At the same time, a realization began to form in his mind. It turned out that as long as one was powerful enough to instill fear in others, people really wouldn't even dare to mention your name. In other words, what this guy said about making one's name a taboo was genuinely feasible. One person is enough to make their name a taboo. And that person is me. It can only be me. Maybe I can find a way to learn something from him, and then I will. A flicker of red light, barely noticeable, flashed in Tom's eyes again. Tom's subtle change in expression certainly didn't escape Wade's eyes. He knew very well that Tom was not the type of person who would willingly stay under someone else's control. Without a doubt, today's incident, Tom would find a way to get revenge for it. However, Wade still let Tom leave his room safely. Not killing this future Dark Lord was, on one hand, because Wade didn't want Tom to die in his room and cause unnecessary trouble. On the other hand, Tom, while alive, could still be useful to Wade. The most important reason was that Wade knew Dumbledore would personally deliver Tom's acceptance letter to Hogwarts. Wade also wanted to witness the famous scene of Dumbledore setting Tom's wardrobe on fire. After Tom left, Wade closed the door again and looked at the broken door lock, his left hand gently resting on it. Since he now knew that the power he wielded was magic, and recalling the spells from the books and movies he had read and watched before transmigrating, there was no reason not to give it a try. Reparo. He uttered the spell he remembered instead of just saying repair. As soon as the words were spoken, the door lock hanging on the doorframe made a creaking sound and gradually began to repair itself. It was unclear whether the spell had worked or if it was simply the result of Wade's repeated practice. Wade looked at the repaired door lock, noticing that there were still some obvious cracks on it, feeling a bit uncertain. He remembered that, in addition to the incantations, magic also involved gestures, pauses, and other factors. So, perhaps his spell hadn't worked properly. If it had, the cracks shouldn't have remained, right? However, Wade wasn't in a hurry about this. For now, he set aside thoughts of spells and magic. Because in addition to discovering what world he had entered, he had also activated a system, which he hadn't had a chance to look at yet. With that thought, Wade mentally called out to the system he had just activated. The moment Wade had this thought, a familiar ding sound echoed in his mind. Ding! Host has successfully bound the merit system. By doing good deeds, you can accumulate merit points and exchange them for items in the system's shop. Ding! System prompt: the system shop refreshes 2 items daily, at 12 AM. The host has one function to lock a product, and the locked product will not be refreshed. Ding! Detecting that the host has just interacted with the future Dark Lord. After assessment, the host is evidently more capable of becoming the Dark Lord. Therefore, the host only needs to achieve the Dark Lord achievement to immediately become a god and transcend this world. Additionally, the standards for the Dark Lord achievement will be determined by the system. Please work hard, host. Wade stroked his smooth chin and slowly sat down on the single bed nearby. Becoming the Dark Lord wasn't actually that difficult. After gaining more power, he could just follow the path that Voldemort took in the future. Or, after Grindelwald was imprisoned, he could simply use his methods and do it all over again. However, in order to support such a venture, he would need to have immense power himself. Although he didn't have the system, Wade was confident he could make himself strong. But, having a system and not using it, that would be like entering a treasure mountain and leaving empty-handed. So, using it was a must. Now, the key question was, doing good deeds seemed to be at odds with his goal of becoming the Dark Lord? Suddenly, a smile appeared on Wade's lips. Challenge accepted. Who said that doing good deeds couldn't be part of becoming the Dark Lord? It all depended on how he went about doing those good deeds. Chapter 4, The Correct Use of Tom. However, if he did that, he wouldn't be able to directly follow the same path as Voldemort and Grindelwald. Wade already had a plan in mind, and then he opened the system interface in his mind. The system interface was very simple, showing only products and merit points balance. Item 1, Herbal Solution 50 ml, unlocked, 5 merit points. Item 2, Beginner's Guide to Curses, unlocked, 50 merit points. Refresh time countdown, 8 hours 27 minutes 39 seconds. Merit points, 50 points. Dark Lord achievement, not yet achieved. Upon seeing the second item, Wade immediately and decisively clicked to check it out. Beginner's Guide to Curses is a system-exclusive version of a beginner's curse book, covering almost all the low-level curses circulating in the world today. It provides detailed descriptions of all casting techniques for these curses, as well as their historical evolution. Before even finishing the system's description, Wade didn't hesitate and immediately chose to purchase. Although this book only covered low-level curses, for Wade, a complete novice in magic, it was still extremely helpful. Moreover, with the level of detail in this curse book, it would definitely not be available in any bookstore. Ding! Do you wish to purchase Beginner's Guide to Curses? Yes. Ding! Please select the language for the book. I can choose the language? English please. But can you make it more modernized including some gens vocabulary? He had only asked casually, knowing that it would be very hard for others to understand while it was still the 1930s. Ding! The modernized English version of Beginner's Guide to Curses has been shipped. Please check your collection. Wade suddenly felt warmth in his palm, and a book with a black cover suddenly appeared in his hand. Wade picked up the book with some confusion. He realized the thickness didn't seem right. If this book truly contained as much content as the system description mentioned, it would definitely not be that thin. Wade glanced at the pitch-black cover and saw that the book's name was written in large gilded letters, Oliver Twist. Where's the curse book I was promised? Why is it Dickens' novel instead? Wade furrowed his brow. Suddenly, Wade noticed that when he fully focused on the book title, the English title of Oliver Twist slowly transformed into Modern English Beginner's Guide to Curses within his vision. What amazed Wade even more was that when his gaze shifted away from the text, the title would revert back to the English Oliver Twist. Ding! The system-exclusive edition of the book can only be fully viewed by the host and those whom the host grants permission. The curse book's built-in camouflage function made Wade quite satisfied. Nice! Since this book could disguise itself, he no longer had to worry about others noticing this excessively detailed curse book. Moreover, since the real content of the book was hidden, he couldn't gauge its level of detail based on thickness alone. Wade casually opened the book, and sure enough, the novel content gradually transformed into detailed curse explanations under his gaze. The curse book would normally contain many Old English words, and even though Wade was good at English, it wouldn't have been that easy for him to understand as a young biologist. After all, old literature isn't everybody's cup of tea. But since the version Wade had in hand was the system-produced modern English version, with a translation that was precise, faithful, and elegant, this problem was naturally resolved. Knock knock. Sir, it's time for dinner. Wade, who had been immersed in his study of curses, lifted his head and looked at the darkening sky outside the window. Unknowingly, it was already time for dinner. Wade opened the door and saw Tom standing at the doorway, appearing somewhat humble, with a submissive expression on his face. It was as if the arrogant person from earlier in the day had no connection to him at all. When needed, his thick skin could be quite impressive. On the other hand, this could also be considered one of Tom's special talents. Tom, don't call me sir, it sounds weird. If you don't mind, just call me Wade, Wade said with a smile. Tom nodded and gave a faint smile in return. Then when there are others around, I'll call you Wade, but when we're alone, I'll still call you sir. I have to admit, Tom is indeed a born pretender. He spoke smoothly, always considering others, and looked quite good. Anyone who didn't know him would most likely be deceived. No wonder, after starting school, aside from Dumbledore, who had seen his true nature, all the other teachers and students adored him. Then, as you wish. Wade noncommittally responded and then walked toward the dining area. Tom quickly followed him. Along the way, Tom's behavior was flawless. He followed Wade with the utmost respect, completely appearing like a sycophant. But Wade knew, this was a poisonous snake. As soon as it found the opportunity, it would leap forward and sink its fangs into his throat. What a malicious child if that's the case. Wade seemed to remember something, then glanced at Tom, who was obediently following him, and a faint smile suddenly appeared on his lips. Slap! Tom covered his head, looking at Wade in shock, with a flash of anger in his eyes, but it was quickly concealed. Wade, sir, why did you hit me? Ding! System detected that the host caused insulting harm to the malicious child, rewarding 10 merit points. Very good, successfully developing Tom's correct usage, and by the way, the merit points for buying herbal solution were also easily acquired. Upon hearing the system prompt, Wade withdrew his hand with satisfaction. I'm sorry, I just saw a fly on your head. Then where's the fly? Tom rubbed his still thick hair, looking confused. It flew away, Wade said calmly. Tom widened his eyes. At that moment, even if he were an idiot, he could tell that Wade had deliberately hit him. Hurry up and go. Mrs. Cole doesn't have the habit of waiting for people to eat. Tom looked at Wade's back, feeling both shocked and angry. Did he guess what I was going to do? No, he shouldn't have. How could he know what I was thinking? Then why did he suddenly hit me? Could it be he's testing me? Testing if I'm really obedient? Thinking of this, Tom quickly tried to recall if he had shown any inappropriate expression when he was hit earlier. But, Tom hadn't looked in a mirror, so how could he know if he had controlled his expression well at that moment? Tom nervously followed behind. Now, he was very worried that Wade might suddenly turn against him and leave him half dead. Because if it were him, he would definitely do that. Chapter 5, I'm a nobody to you? Tom, you took the wrong turn, you should be walking this way. Ah! Wade's words brought Tom's thoughts back to reality. At some point, he had already reappeared in front of Tom. Sorry, I just spaced out for a moment, Tom hurriedly explained. Tom, you're trying too hard. If you want to appear obedient, you need to act more naturally, Wade said meaningfully, patting Tom's shoulder before turning and walking away again. Tom stood frozen in place. Wade's words struck him like a thunderbolt. I was too naive. I took it for granted. My sudden change in attitude, how could he not have guessed what I wanted to do? So he's warning me. Telling me not to have any inappropriate thoughts. He knows that I could turn on him at any moment, yet he remains completely unconcerned and lets me be. Does he think I'm not even a threat to him? Damn it! This arrogant bastard! How dare he? How dare he look down on me like this? Tom's face turned pale, his eyes filled with humiliation, and the veins in his neck bulged. In fact, Tom understood Wade's thoughts better than anyone, because before he met Wade, he thought the same about others. He believed that everyone else was just a bunch of mediocre fools who posed no threat to someone with extraordinary talent like himself, which was why he acted so arrogantly. He never expected that the person who would be treated as an ordinary fool would end up being himself. I never imagined that one day, I would become the fool that others looked down on. Having been hit by his own boomerang, Tom now began to understand, at least a little, how those he had once tormented must have felt. Ding! Detected that the host caused a significant amount of mental damage to the future Dark Lord. Reward, 50 merit points. Ah, Tom, I'm starting to like you. Mrs. Cole was a haggard, thin woman. The shadow of war was gradually looming over all of Europe. With fear spreading among the people, fewer kind-hearted individuals were donating money or goods to the orphanage. Mrs. Cole didn't even know if, in a few months, this orphanage would still be able to keep going. In order to manage the dozens of orphans and ensure that, in these difficult times, they could still manage to have enough food and clothing, she was physically and mentally exhausted. Eric hasn't been feeling well all day. God help us, I hope it's not chicken pox again, we've already got enough on our plate. Billy seems to be much better, remember to help him apply iodine tonight, Mrs. Cole said as she distributed food, speaking to a girl beside her who was dressed in rags and wearing an old apron. Mrs. Cole soon noticed Wade and Tom, who had arrived late. Wade, how are you adjusting here? Tom, I just hope you don't use your usual tactics to bully Wade. If you do, you'll be back in that little dark room. Who's bullying whom? Tom pursed his lips and said nothing, silently staring at the dinner that had just been handed to him. A small portion of baked beans, some mashed potatoes, a piece of bread, and a bowl of soup that he couldn't tell what it was made from. I'm very comfortable, Mrs. Cole. In fact, compared to the children still wandering outside, starving, I'm doing much better. If it weren't for you taking me off the street, I don't even know what would have happened to me. Wade looked at Mrs. Cole with a face full of gratitude. I really appreciate it. Oh, you're such a good boy. Turns out, bringing you back was the right choice. You've helped me a lot these past few days. Now, eat your dinner. Here, take this. Mrs. Cole's tired face showed a faint smile as she slipped an egg into Wade's coat pocket. Meanwhile, Tom glanced at his own meager dinner, then looked at Wade, whose plate not only had a chicken egg but also an apple in his pocket. He immediately felt the disparity between people. Watching Wade sitting in the corner, slowly peeling his egg, Tom couldn't help but sit down across from him, holding his own plate. What kind of help did you give that woman? Why does she look at you so differently? Wade carefully scooped out the egg yolk and casually replied, maybe, just like you said, it's just because of my pretty face. Tom tightened his grip on the spoon in his hand, wanting to get angry but too afraid to lash out. Haha, I'm just joking. I'll give you half of the egg. Wade placed half of the egg yolk into Tom's plate with his spoon, despite the disgusted look Tom gave him. I just did a few small things within my ability. Of course, these small things just happened to be exactly what she liked. In fact, you could do it too. It's just that you have always held yourself in high regard and have never been willing to do so, Wade continued. Tom disdainfully pushed the half egg yolk to the side. Humph, anyway, I'd never do something like deliberately trying to please someone. Oh? Then who was the one groveling in front of me just now? Wade laughed. Tom's pale face unusually flushed with embarrassment. That's because you're stronger than me. I had to. Of course, Tom, I'm not saying you're wrong. In fact, to achieve your goals, occasionally saying some flattering words or doing a few small things for others is no big deal. Wade looked at the embarrassed Tom and suddenly smiled again. Just like how I pleased Mrs. Cole to get a better room for my practice and research, and how you're trying to please me to get methods to enhance your strength so you can take revenge on me. Tom felt as though his breath had been cut off. He hated the feeling of being seen through so easily and being unable to control himself. Ding! After the system prompt, Wade received another 10 merit points as a reward. Reparo. In his single room, Wade made a special gesture and cast the spell at the door lock, which was covered in cracks. Ryeb. A slight metallic rubbing sound was heard, and the cracks on the metal door lock gradually disappeared. Wade looked at the now perfectly intact door lock with satisfaction. Beginner's Guide to Curses was indeed detailed enough. Not only did it document the historical evolution of each spell, but it also recorded the correct gestures for casting each spell without a wand. That was why his repair spell was so successful this time. It could be said that after obtaining this book, Wade's research and practice speed had at least increased by 100 times. After spending 5 merit points to buy a bottle of herbal solution, Wade still had 65 merit points left. Wade felt a bit excited about what items would refresh in the shop after midnight tonight. Luckily, there was the product lock feature. Otherwise, the 65 merit points might not have been enough. Chapter 6, The Hanging Heart finally died. On the ground floor, in a dark little room, there was a simple arrangement with a shabby wardrobe and a small iron bed, making the room look bare. In the dark corner in front of the bed, Tom sat on a grey blanket, his eyes focused on his right hand. Wrapped around his right hand was a small green snake. Hiss! Tom continuously made hissing sounds, just like a snake. The little snake seemed to understand him, as it nodded in a human-like manner. After a while, the little snake crawled off Tom's hand, slithered through the narrow window, and quickly disappeared. Wade, what is your powerful secret? I will soon get the answer. What you can do, I can do too. Tom silently clenched his fist as he watched the direction the little snake had disappeared in. Petrificus totalis. Thud. A grey mouse fell straight down from the windowsill. Wade picked up a green stick nearby and poked at the mouse. It felt like poking a stone. After thinking for a moment, Wade made another simple gesture with his hand. Finite incantatum. Eek! The grey mouse, which had become as stiff as stone, suddenly came back to life. It jumped up from the ground and ran off crazily. However, with so few furnishings in the room, the grey mouse had nowhere to hide and could only keep running toward the windowsill, which was about half a meter high. Immobilis. Thud. Finite incantatum. Eek! Immobilis. Thud. Finite incantatum. Eek! After more than 10 rounds of this, the grey mouse stopped running. It lay on its back in the corner, playing dead. Wade paid no more attention to the mouse and continued flipping through the curse book in his hand. Sure enough, practicing these offensive curses was much more effective when there was a living target. However, Wade was somewhat confused. Even with his talent, how was it possible to successfully cast a moderately difficult spell without a wand after just 10 or so attempts? The learning speed seemed a bit too fast. Moreover, when facing Tom's attack the other day, Wade realized that his magical attack, when it hit him, felt like a gentle breeze. It wasn't even a threat, it couldn't even be strong enough to function as a fan. According to the book's explanation, the reason for this phenomenon was simple: it was due to the massive disparity in the magical power between the two, and it had little to do with practice. Logically, this shouldn't have happened. Tom was supposed to be the future Dark Lord, and his talent should have been extraordinarily strong. At the same age, even if Wade's talent was stronger than his, it shouldn't be to the point of utterly overwhelming him. In the end, Wade found the answer to the problem in the section of the book that discussed the principles of magical power. When a wizard gets older, their magic power just gets stronger, feel me? But once they hit adulthood, it's like they hit a cap, you know? If they stop practicing or just ain't using their powers, that magic gonna dip or straight up disappear, no cap. And like, real talk, they say the power of a wizard's magic is tied to the strength of their soul too, fam. After finishing the reading, Wade suddenly remembered something: he wasn't truly Tom's peer. In fact, after transmigrating, only his physical age had regressed. His actual age was already that of an adult. Therefore, his soul's strength was likely still that of an adult. From this, Wade formed a preliminary hypothesis: the magical power he currently possessed had already reached that of an adult's magical strength. When he fought with the underage Tom, even if Tom were exceptionally gifted, it was still an adult fighting a child. It was hard not to overwhelm him. So can my magical power continue to naturally increase? If it can't grow naturally, is there a way to break through this bottleneck? Regarding this question, Wade wasn't in a hurry. As the former youngest biologist, breaking through the limits of the human body had been his primary research topic before he transmigrated. Now, however, the object of his research had shifted from ordinary humans to wizards. Tom absent-mindedly flipped through the book in his hands, but his gaze never really fell on the pages. In fact, the little snake he had sent out hadn't returned, which made him feel uneasy. He was well aware that whenever Wade closed the door to his room, that was when he carried out his secret practice. Tom had sent the little snake to spy, intending to wait for it to return and tell him what it had seen, so that he might be able to uncover Wade's secret to growing stronger. But now, the little snake that should have returned long ago still hadn't shown up. Another hour passed, and Tom could no longer wait. Taking a deep breath, he walked toward Wade's room. Wade's room was on the first floor. As soon as Tom went up, he saw the door to Wade's room. But the door was slightly ajar. It seemed like it was waiting for someone. Tom barely held back his unease and slowly pushed the door open. Inside, Wade was gently poking at a grey mouse on the floor with a green stick. But Tom suddenly felt that the stick looked somewhat familiar. Wade turned his head and saw Tom peeking around the door, a gentle smile spreading across his face. The merit points are here. Tom, you're here. I was just about to tell you about our special abilities. I've discovered a very interesting use for them. When Wade stood up, Tom finally understood why he felt the stick in Wade's hand looked so familiar. It was, in fact, a small snake that had somehow become stiff and rigid. Tom's heart, which had been hanging in suspense, finally sank. Ding! Detected that the host has caused some changes in the future Dark Lord's life trajectory, rewarding the host with 100 merit points. Wade, H100. Hogwarts. The blazing fireplace made the circular headmaster's office warm as spring. Armando, I happen to be going to London. These two children, I'll take care of them, Dumbledore said, shaking the two letters in his hand. Oh, of course, no problem. Dippet sat at his large desk, stroking his somewhat disheveled white beard, his murky eyes looking at Dumbledore. Has it been confirmed? Is he really coming to London? Not confirmed yet, but there are signs pointing to it. However, you know, I can't ignore any news related to him, especially since this information comes from a very reliable source, Dumbledore said, carefully placing the two envelopes into his coat pocket. It was Scamander who wrote to inform you, right? I remember he didn't graduate from Hogwarts in the usual manner, Dippet asked somewhat casually. Yes, but I assure you, Amandu, Newt is absolutely trustworthy. Moreover, his abilities are indeed widely recognized, Dumbledore said with a serious expression. Mr. Scamander has indeed proven his abilities and stance through his actions. I don't mean to question his trustworthiness. I've always trusted your ability to judge people. So there's a very high chance that he really has gone to London. Are you prepared? Dumbledore took a deep breath. Of course, I've been prepared to face him for years. It's just that over these years, his movements have become very secretive, and he hasn't shown up in front of me again. Good, I'm glad you've made your final decision. If you need help, feel free to let me know. Although I'm a bit older, I'm not yet so useless that I can't wave my wand. I will, Amandu, and I sincerely thank you for your understanding and help over the years. Alright, no need to get sentimental. Without my help, you would have done just fine. Go, head to London, and settle everything once and for all, and of course, after it's over, don't forget to deliver the acceptance letters to those 2 children. They're both at the same Muggle orphanage, and a professor must personally go and explain the situation to them. Chapter 7, Dumbledore. Ding! Time announcement, midnight 12 o'clock, new items have appeared in the shop. Wade put down the curse book, which had been disguised as Oliver Twist, and directly opened the system shop. Item 1, Energy Potion 50 ml, unlocked, 5 merit points. Item 2, Premium Memory Potion, unlocked, 100 merit points. Refresh time countdown, 23 hours 59 minutes 30 seconds. Merit points, 165 points. Dark Lord achievement, not achieved. At first glance, these 2 items seemed somewhat ordinary. Wade casually flipped through the system description of both items. Energy Potion, a system-produced energy potion. Only 50 ml is needed to keep a person energetic and free from fatigue for 48 hours. It is recommended to use in moderation. Taking too much can cause drowsiness. If side effects occur, please quickly visit St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries during a brief period of wakefulness for treatment. This is just an enhanced version of a Monster energy drink. Wade looked at the energy potion in the shop interface, feeling a sense of familiarity. Pre-workout, coffee, and the like. He had drunk a lot of it before, especially for work. Next, Wade turned his attention to the second item. Wade quickly noticed that although the second item was also listed as a potion, it didn't specify a dosage like the energy potion did. Premium Memory Potion, a system-produced exclusive item. After consumption, it significantly enhances the user's memory. The potion's effects are permanent. The description was simple and blunt, but Wade couldn't help but be intrigued. A person's memory is one of the most important foundations for learning new knowledge. Having a good memory can provide great help in both studying and research. Moreover, the effect of this potion was permanent. Although he didn't know exactly how much this significant enhancement referred to, Wade still didn't hesitate and spent 100 merit points to purchase the potion. Speaking of these 165 merit points, although he didn't understand why the more he dealt with Tom, the more merit points he received, he still had to thank Mr. Riddle for his selfless contribution. Otherwise, he would have to leave this memory potion locked for now. Wade only felt a familiar warmth in the palm of his hand, and then a small transparent glass vial appeared in his hand. Wade removed the cork and sniffed it. It was colorless and odorless, just like ordinary water, nothing remarkable at all. Gulp gulp. Without delay, Wade tilted his head back and emptied the vial's contents into his mouth. He smacked his lips. Well, the taste was also like distilled water, totally flavorless. At that moment, the small glass vial in his hand suddenly turned into light particles and disappeared, as if it had been retrieved by the system. Wade carefully sensed his body but didn't feel anything unusual, as if the potion he had just consumed was really just plain water. Wade was a bit puzzled. After waiting for a while, he picked up the curse book again and quickly flipped to a page he hadn't read before, skimming through it. After scanning through it quickly, Wade finally began to feel the change within himself. Just from a brief glance, without even starting to fully understand the knowledge on the page, the words and images were already deeply imprinted in his mind, as if they had been photos burned into his brain. Fuck. Did I become Mike Ross or something? It was as if he had read and memorized them many times already. The premium memory potion's effect was beyond Wade's expectations. After significantly enhancing his memory, it seemed that Wade had developed the ability to remember everything he saw. Wade was in a good mood. The 100 merit points I spent were definitely well worth it. He thanked Tom once again in his mind for his outstanding contribution to this cause. Then, Wade bought the energy potion and lifted a floor tile under the carpet, placing the potion inside. In this temporary storage compartment, there was also the herbal potion he had bought earlier. After hiding the potions, Wade glanced at his remaining 60 merit points. Although Tom was a great tool for earning merit points, it was still a bit slow to keep milking him for points all the time. Wade decided to try other methods of earning merit points tomorrow. As for tonight, after looking at the cold, hard iron bed, Wade decisively lifted the carpet again, pried open the floor tile, and took out the energy potion. Why sleep long in life, when death should bring eternal rest? With the ability to remember everything and the boost from the super coffee, if he didn't study properly, how could he justify Riddle's selfless contribution? Several days passed in the blink of an eye. This afternoon. Knock knock knock. A series of knocks came from the closed door of the orphanage. Ailey quickly put down the tray with iodine and hurried to the door to open it. Standing outside was a tall, thin man who looked somewhat tired. He was wearing an elaborate dark purple velvet suit, which looked rather odd. His hair and beard were reddish-brown, and although his appearance was quite unusual, his demeanor was very refined. He must be a lawyer or a professor or something, Ailey thought to herself. The tall man smiled kindly. Good afternoon, I have an appointment with Mrs. Cole. I believe she is the head of this orphanage. Oh, please wait a moment. Ailey turned and loudly called toward the distance, Mrs. Cole. A loud response came from far away. Ailey then turned back to the tall man and said, Come on in, she'll be here shortly. The tall man stepped into the hallway, which was paved with black and white tiles, and silently glanced around. The place looked overall quite dilapidated. It was clear that the orphanage was not in the best of condition. But despite the dilapidated environment, everything was spotless, clearly showing that the person in charge here was very diligent and responsible. The door behind them had not fully closed when Mrs. Cole, looking exhausted, quickly walked over. As she approached the tall, thin man, she anxiously spoke to another girl wearing an apron. Then take this bottle of iodine to Martha upstairs, Billy Stubbs is picking at his scab, and Eric Willie's bed sheets are soaked with sweat, but treating the chicken pox is the priority right now. Before Mrs. Cole could finish her sentence, she saw the tall, thin man in front of her. Honestly, his strange attire surprised her. Good afternoon, the tall man extended his hand. I'm Albus Dumbledore. I sent you an appointment letter, and you kindly invited me to come here today. Mrs. Cole seemed momentarily confused, then after a moment, she said, Oh yes, there was such an appointment. All right, let's go to my office to talk. Dumbledore smiled and politely followed Mrs. Cole. Around the corner of the staircase, Wade watched Dumbledore's back, a smile forming on his face. About time. Dumbledore had finally arrived. Although Dumbledore was still very young, his distinctive appearance and aura made it easy for Wade to recognize him. After all, at this time and place, the only tall, thin man with a crooked nose and blue eyes coming to visit Mrs. Cole could only be him, Dumbledore. Beside Wade, Tom was reluctantly wiping the banister with a rag, his face full of displeasure. Naturally, Dumbledore's unique appearance immediately caught his attention. Who is that man? The color of his clothes is disgusting. Was his nose broken by someone? Chapter 8, Tom is kind and introverted. Tom, leave this to me, you can go back to your room and rest. Wade took the rag from Tom's hand and waved at him. Tom suddenly looked up, his eyes filled with disbelief. To be honest, Wade had been acting strangely these past few days, dedicating himself entirely to doing good deeds. It was one thing for him to go crazy, but now he was even forcing Tom to help. To be fair, Tom had grown up this way, and although he was part of the orphanage, when had he ever done any work? Even if he was assigned a task, he always had other kids volunteer to help. But what could he do? He couldn't beat Wade. He hadn't expected that after enduring humiliation and following Wade around doing menial tasks for several days, this bastard would actually let him go back to rest early today? Something's not right. There must be a conspiracy. No, I'm not tired at all, really. I can keep working. Tom silently took back the rag and put on a perfect smile. Although he didn't know what kind of bad intentions he might be plotting, as long as he didn't follow what Wade said, he definitely wouldn't lose out. I was thinking about something else just now and didn't hear you clearly. What did you say? Wade looked at Tom. Under Wade's kind gaze, Tom's smile gradually faded. Fine, not following Wade's instructions might lead to problems later, but right now he would definitely lose if he didn't. I said, I am indeed a little tired. So, the remaining work, I'll leave to you. Tom sincerely handed the rag back to Wade, then quickly disappeared around the corner of the stairs. Wade obviously didn't just let Tom go back to his room for no reason. If Dumbledore wanted to see Tom later, it would be better to meet him in Tom's room. After all, Wade still wanted to witness the famous scene of Dumbledore setting Tom's wardrobe on fire. Wouldn't want to miss some absolute cinema. Keek. Wade put down the rag and turned to hurry to his room. To prevent Dumbledore from coming straight to his room, he needed to hide the bottles and jars he had hidden under the carpet in a different place. After all, a wizard of Dumbledore's caliber could always see traces others couldn't. The system shop hadn't refreshed any good items these past few days. Most of what appeared were potions and some odd materials. These items could all be found in the wizarding world, so after Wade selectively bought some potions for backup, he hadn't bought anything else. Over the past few days, Wade had discovered something else. When he did good deeds by himself, the increase in merit points was barely noticeable. However, if he made Tom do it with him, the results were completely different. Wade speculated that the more evil the person he forced to do good deeds was, the more merit points he earned. Perhaps it was because his actions reduced the probability of them doing evil in the future? After all, the system had also given him 100 merit points earlier, possibly because he had changed some aspects of Tom's life trajectory. Of course, this was just a guess. Or maybe system liked when he's a dick to a villain. Wade planned to try it with another villain in the future. But because of this, after Wade dragged Tom through some labor reform, he had successfully accumulated a total of 300 merit points. Oh Tom, my point farm. May Merlin protect him. After hiding the potions, Wade casually returned to the corner of the stairs and picked up the rag. At just that moment, Mrs. Cole, with a flushed face, walked out of her office, and Dumbledore slowly followed behind her. Clearly, their conversation had come to an end. "Oh Wade," Mrs. Cole called out as soon as she saw him. As Mrs. Cole approached, Wade smelled the distinct scent of gin. It seemed that the flushed complexion was due to alcohol. "This is Mr. Dumbledore Heek." "Oh, sorry, Dumbledore, he's here to see you and Tom, to tell you something." "Never mind, let him explain it to you." "Where is Tom?" Meeting Dumbledore's gentle gaze, Wade answered, "Tom went back to his room to rest." "What's the excuse this time?" "Sigh, never mind, he has changed a lot since he started hanging out with you. What more can I ask for? My God, when have I ever seen Tom help other kids?" "Dear, this must be your doing," Mrs. Cole said with a deep sigh. Since Wade arrived, the reclusive and strange Tom seemed like a completely different person. Not only did he stop bullying the other children, but he even helped Wade to assist the other kids in the orphanage. None of the chores around the orphanage had been left undone. For a bad kid to undergo such a drastic change in such a short time, Mrs. Cole was a bit confused, but mostly relieved. "Mrs. Cole, I really didn't do much. Tom is inherently kind, it's just that in the past, he was a bit introverted and didn't know how to interact with others," Wade said with a smile. After all, Tom has always been kind and introverted around me, lol. Mrs. Cole. Kind? Introverted? Are we talking about Tom? Mrs. Cole couldn't help but purse her lips, but since there were outsiders present, she didn't say anything further. "I have many things to do. Since this gentleman is here to see both of you, you can take him to Tom's room," she said. "Mrs. Cole." Before Mrs. Cole could finish her sentence, Ailey's voice called out from a distance. "I'm coming." Mrs. Cole responded loudly, then looked at Wade helplessly. "You're all right on your own, right?" "Of course, I'm fine." Wade nodded. Once Mrs. Cole hurried off, Wade looked at Dumbledore. This was the first time he was alone with Dumbledore. Just by making eye contact with Dumbledore, Wade knew that, although this man appeared very gentle, he was definitely not someone to be underestimated. It was an instinctive feeling, like standing at the foot of a mountain, gazing up at its peak filled with an indescribable sense of pressure, giving off the impression of being an insurmountable obstacle. Wade politely said, "Sir, please follow me." With that, he turned and led the way to Tom's room. Dumbledore immediately followed, and Wade keenly felt Dumbledore's gaze fixed on him. "Aren't you curious about why I'm looking for you too?" Dumbledore suddenly asked from behind. Of course I'm curious. Then why haven't you asked me anything? You don't seem like an introverted child. Dumbledore was indeed a little puzzled. Normally, children at this age were full of curiosity. Knowing that he had come to find both him and Tom, this child hadn't asked a single question along the way. Since you're looking for both Tom and me, it must be for the same reason. If that's the case, we can talk about it when we meet Tom, so you don't have to repeat yourself. Ha ha ha, that's true, but I don't really mind repeating myself a few times. After all, the things I have to tell you aren't something that can be explained in just a few words. Dumbledore looked at Wade's slim back with interest. He had met many children of 11, but he had never encountered one as composed as Wade. Moreover, according to Mrs. Cole, this child with a good personality was picked up off the street by her, and had never spoken about his past. Mrs. Cole suspected that he must have gone through indescribable pain in his past, so she didn't probe into his background further. However, his mannerisms and behavior indicated that his origins were definitely not ordinary. This piqued Dumbledore's curiosity about Wade. Perhaps this child came from a pure-blood family from a different place? I've heard that before meeting you, Tom did many bad things, but after meeting you, he suddenly changed? How did you manage that? Chapter 9, Just calm down, man. Well, he can't beat me. Wade stopped, turned around, and met Dumbledore's blue eyes. Dumbledore was slightly taken aback. Wade's answer was quite reasonable. We've arrived, Wade added. It was only then that Dumbledore realized they were standing in front of a wooden door. Wade pushed open Tom's room door as if he were returning home. Tom, this is Mr. Dumbledore. He has something to discuss with us. Wade walked in. Wade purposely mispronounced Dumbledore's name because Mrs. Cole had made the same mistake when she introduced him earlier. Dumbledore helplessly corrected him, actually, my name is Dumbledore, Albus Dumbledore. I'm a professor. Tom was sitting on his blanket, holding a book, looking somewhat warily at the man who claimed to be a professor. Dumbledore extended his hand. Hello, Tom. Tom hesitated for a moment, glanced at Wade, and then extended his hand to shake Dumbledore's. Dumbledore pulled over a chair and sat down, while Wade directly sat on Tom's bed. Professor? Is it something like doctor? What are you doing here? Tom asked, eyeing Wade cautiously again. I am Professor Dumbledore, and I work at a school called Hogwarts. I'm here to take you to my school, or rather, your new school, if you're willing, Dumbledore explained. After hearing Dumbledore's words, Tom reacted strongly. He jumped up from the carpet, quickly distancing himself from Dumbledore, his face filled with anger. Who exactly are you? What are you doing here? Tell me the truth. He emphasized the last three words with force, as if commanding. He glared at Dumbledore with wide eyes, but Dumbledore simply smiled pleasantly without answering. Who exactly are you? Tom repeated, speaking slowly and deliberately. Dumbledore patiently replied, I already told you, I am Professor Dumbledore. No. Don't try to deceive me. You're from a mental hospital, aren't you? Professor, yes, of course. I'm not going, do you understand? Tom said this with agitation. Suddenly, his gaze fell on Wade, and his face instantly changed. Remembering Wade's unusual behavior of telling him to return early and rest today, Tom instantly understood the truth. You called him here, didn't you? You're finally going to make your move on me, aren't you? Yes, you're going to send me to the mental hospital. You're so cruel. Dumbledore looked at Wade with a strange expression. Wade shrugged, you know, we've fought before. Recalling what Wade had said earlier, that Tom couldn't beat him, Dumbledore's expression became even more peculiar. Clearly, the relationship between Wade and Tom was far more complicated than just having a fight. Judging by Tom's reactive behavior, he had definitely been heavily pressured by Wade. I'm not from a mental hospital, Dumbledore turned to Tom and said patiently again. I'm a teacher. If you sit quietly, I will tell you what Hogwarts is. Of course, if you don't want to go there, no one will force you. And Dumbledore glanced at Wade, besides you, Wade is also on my invitation. So, he's going to. Tom looked at Dumbledore with suspicion, then glanced at Wade. Tom, can you calm down, straighten up, and not embarrass yourself? Wade's words made Tom's face turn red. His previous behavior, all startled and flustered, was indeed a bit embarrassing. After seeing that Tom had finally calmed down, Dumbledore continued, Hogwarts is a school that accepts students with special abilities. This description sounded too much like a mental hospital to Tom. I'm not crazy. Tom started to speak, but once again met Wade's calm gaze. In the end, he closed his mouth, swallowing the rest of his words and allowing Dumbledore to continue. It's a school for magic. Magic. Tom whispered the word. Yes. So the things I can do are actually magic. Tom looked at his hands with excitement. What can you do? Dumbledore asked with great interest. I can do anything, Riddle said, panting, a flush of excitement appearing on his sunken cheek, looking quite fervent. I can make things move without touching them. I can make animals obey me without training. I can make those who anger me suffer. If I want, I can make them hurt. Before Tom could finish his animated speech, he once again met Wade's gaze, and his excited emotions immediately calmed down. Except for Wade. That bastard. Calmed down, Tom slowly sat back down. Dumbledore also looked at Wade. Wade, you seem less excited. Did you already know what your abilities were? No, I just found out. Just like Tom, I also know where I'm different. But since this has always been my ability, and now I just know what it is, what's there to be excited about? Dumbledore nodded. You're right, Wade. What a peculiar child, so composed, it's hard to believe he's only 11 years old. What has he gone through in the past? You are both wizards, Dumbledore continued. Then, you must be a wizard too? Wade asked. Yes, I am also a wizard. I have the same special abilities as you. Prove it to me, Riddle immediately said. His commanding tone was just like when he had said tell the truth earlier. Dumbledore raised an eyebrow. If I prove this to you, you'll come with me to Hogwarts. Of course I will. Then you will address me as Professor or Sir. Riddle's expression froze for a moment before he spoke. He said, with almost imperceptible politeness, I'm sorry, sir, what I meant was may I ask, Professor, could you show me? Dumbledore didn't waste any time. He pulled a slender, jet-black wand from the inner pocket of his suit jacket. Wade raised an eyebrow, his gaze filled with a hint of anticipation. Dumbledore pointed his wand at the shabby wardrobe in the corner and casually waved it. Swoom! A fierce burst of flames instantly engulfed the shabby wardrobe. Ah! Tom screamed again, jumping up. All his belongings were in that wardrobe. Just as Tom was about to jump up and demand an explanation from Dumbledore, the flames vanished in an instant, and the wardrobe remained standing there, completely unharmed, as if nothing had happened. Chapter 10, Tom's Collection. Tom's scream stopped, and he stared fixedly at the wardrobe, his black eyes once again gleaming with excitement. Clearly, Dumbledore's display of magic had truly stunned him. Wade also turned his gaze to the wardrobe. He knew that if there was no special reason, Dumbledore would never have used such an intense method to demonstrate his magic. And, as it turned out, he was right. Dumbledore calmly said, I think something is about to come out of your wardrobe. Sure enough, a creaking sound soon came from inside the wardrobe, and Tom suddenly seemed a bit frightened. Open the door, Dumbledore said, with an authoritative tone. Tom hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he walked over and opened the wardrobe door. On the top shelf of the wardrobe, there was a stack of old clothes with a cardboard box placed on top. Take it out, Dumbledore said. Tom became somewhat flustered at Dumbledore's words, and his hands even trembled slightly as he took the box out. Is there anything in the box that you shouldn't have? Dumbledore asked. Tom lowered his head, his lips tightly pressed together, his hands hesitating as they hovered over the box's lid. Dumbledore noticed that Tom's gaze flicked over to Wade, who had remained silent the whole time, and it seemed that Tom was reluctant to open the box in front of him. Tom! Dumbledore reminded him once again. Yes, I think so, sir, Tom said finally, in a stiff manner, slowly opening the box before collapsing onto the bed. Inside was a mess of ordinary little things, including a yo-yo, a silver thimble, and a harmonica that had lost its shine. Once the box was emptied, the items stopped shaking and quietly lay on the thin bed sheet. Return them to their rightful owners and apologize, Dumbledore said calmly as he put his wand back into his jacket pocket. I will know if you do not. Also, I must warn you, Hogwarts does not tolerate theft. Tom glanced at Wade, who had a faint smile on his face, his hands tightly gripping the lid of the box, his face full of embarrassment. He would rather be locked in the dark room for a month than give Wade, that bastard, another chance to mock him. But now. Finally, he responded in a voice that Dumbledore could barely hear, "Yes, sir." At Hogwarts, Dumbledore continued, "We not only teach you how to use magic, but also how to control it. I'm sure that the way you've used magic has never been in the way our school teaches, nor would it be tolerated by us. You're not the first, and you won't be the last person whose magic gets out of control. But you should know that Hogwarts can expel students, and the Ministry of Magic, yes, there is such a department. It punishes those who break the law more severely. All new witches and wizards entering our world must accept this and obey our laws." "Yes, sir," Tom responded, then suddenly asked, "But why are you only talking about me? I'm not the only one using magic here." As he spoke, his gaze shifted to Wade, who had been watching the situation unfold. "That's because Wade has never used magic on innocent people." Dumbledore's gaze on Tom became sharper. "I am very well aware of your past actions, Tom. Especially what you did to Amy and Dennis in that cave." Tom's face turned pale, his lips trembling, and he didn't speak any further. After all, Dumbledore was stating the truth. Wade had indeed never used magic on the other ordinary people in the orphanage, unlike Tom, because he felt such behavior was childish, boring. Now he must think I'm childish. Boring. Thinking of Wade's mocking gaze, a sense of humiliation welled up inside Tom again. He had already decided not to give that bastard another chance to mock him. Dumbledore looked at Wade and gently asked, "Wade, would you be willing to help me supervise Tom?" "Of course, Professor. In fact, he has already started changing. These things might just be something he hasn't had the chance to return yet." Wade took the box from Tom's hands and placed the items back inside. "I will make sure he returns these to their rightful owners." Tom looked up in surprise at Wade, his expression unreadable. "With you watching over him, I feel reassured," Wade Dumbledore said before looking at Tom. "Tom, I'm very pleased that you've truly changed a lot recently. I hope you continue on this path and don't make the same mistakes again. Magic is wonderful, but it's also extremely easy to lose control. I don't want it to get out of control in your hands again." Tom nodded expressionlessly. "I understand, sir." Wade put the box aside and then asked, "Do we need tuition to go to Hogwarts?" "As you can see, Tom and I are both penniless." Hearing Wade ask the crucial question, Tom couldn't care less about his discomfort at the moment and also looked at Dumbledore with concern. "Oh, that's easily solved." Dumbledore pulled out 2 leather pouches from his pocket. "Hogwarts has a fund to help students who need assistance with purchasing books and robes. You'll need to buy some second-hand spellbooks, but where do we buy spellbooks?" Riddle interrupted him, taking one of the heavy pouches without thanking Dumbledore, and pulled out a large gold galleon, carefully inspecting it. Right now, Tom was more eager than ever to become stronger. Buying spellbooks and learning magic was the simplest way. "In Diagon Alley, I can take you to buy everything you need. Are you going to come with us?" Tom asked. "Of course, if you're willing," Dumbledore replied. "No," Tom saw that Wade didn't stop him, so he continued, "We don't need you, we can manage on our own. Just tell us the address of that Diagon Alley." Tom was practically desperate for Dumbledore to leave. He certainly didn't want Dumbledore to come along and shop with him. Dumbledore didn't insist. Instead, he handed the 2 envelopes containing the admission letters and shopping lists to Wade and Tom. After giving them detailed instructions on how to get to the Leaky Cauldron and other important information, Dumbledore stood up and left. After Dumbledore had been gone for a while, Tom weighed the leather pouch in his hand and couldn't help but ask, "When do you plan to go to that Diagon Alley to buy things?" Wade picked up the box that was on the bed, a faint smile appearing on his face. "Well, of course, that would be after I return these little things of yours to their owners." Upon hearing this, Tom's pale face turned bright red again. Chapter 11, Human Traffickers. The journey from the Wool Orphanage to the Leaky Cauldron was not short, in fact, it could even be described as somewhat distant. However, both Tom and Wade were strapped for cash. So, they had no choice but to walk all the way to the district where the Leaky Cauldron was located. By this time, they had changed out of the orphanage's standard robes and put on worn-out jackets. Tom also wore a somewhat oversized newsboy cap. Of course, all of these were donated old clothes from people, as they didn't have money to buy new clothes. "I think we should have asked Mrs. Cole for some money and take a cab or something," Tom said. After walking for about an hour, Tom felt quite exhausted. Wade glared at Tom. Did you forget that we snuck out this morning? And, by the way, it was you who suggested we sneak out. I just didn't feel like explaining so much to her, Tom said, bending down to rub his legs. Besides, you didn't oppose it either. I didn't oppose it, and of course, I have my reasons, Wade replied, suddenly placing his hand on Tom's shoulder. Don't look back, let's keep walking. What's wrong? Tom asked, confused. Didn't you notice? Someone is following us, Wade said calmly. What? Who? Don't look back, Tom. Let's walk this way, Wade said, suddenly turning into a small alley with Tom. Tom, completely confused, followed Wade and hid around a corner of the alley. I said, who is following us? Tom asked, puzzled. I guess it's a trafficker, Wade said. After all, a good-looking boy like you could fetch a nice price. Tom, annoyed, replied, how do you know they're not after you? You're pretty enough to have that old cat arrange a room for you. Wade signaled for silence. Just then, a man and a woman hurriedly walked into the alley. The man appeared tall and strong, dressed like a laborer. The woman, on the other hand, had her face tightly wrapped in a scarf. Where did they go? The man asked in a gruff voice. I just saw them turn into here, the woman's voice sounded hoarse. This alley is a dead end. As long as they've come in, they must still be here. The man walked deeper into the alley, his sharp, menacing eyes scanning the surroundings. The woman followed closely behind him. She took out a dirty handkerchief and a brown glass bottle, sprinkling something from the bottle onto the handkerchief as she walked. Tom quietly peeked through a gap in the wall at the man, his brow furrowing slightly. I say, just a little further back, there were some cops patrolling. Why don't we go to them? Even if we just walk past them, those two traffickers wouldn't dare follow us. Why do we have to go down this dead end? Wade looked at Tom in shock. My God! Tom, when you're in danger, you want to go find the police. Where did the Tom go who would knock someone's nose with a rusty poker at the slightest provocation? Tom glared at Wade angrily. I just wasn't sure if I could control my magic on him. He's too strong. You don't think I'm afraid of him, do you? Oh, it's okay, I understand, Tom. After all, you're still young. Wade patted Tom's shoulder, offering comfort. I told you. I'm not afraid of him at all. Tom's neck veins were bulging. Ah, yes, yes, of course. How could the great Riddle be afraid of an ordinary man? So you can handle the woman, and I'll take care of the man. Bastard! Can't you understand what I'm saying? Tom was about to explode with anger. Giving that woman to himself, and then Wade going after the man? Wasn't that just implying that he was afraid of the man? Tom, why are you so angry? I totally agree with what you said. Wade replied. You bastard! The argument between the two grew louder and soon caught the attention of the man and woman. Aha! You little brats, so this is where you've been hiding. The man shouted excitedly. This was a hidden dead-end alley, and the two little brats hiding here were practically walking into a trap. Hat, come with us, we'll take you somewhere nice to eat, the woman said with a smile, her eyes gleaming as she looked at Wade and Tom, as if they were two little gold nuggets. Two good-looking boys, and no adults around. This was basically free money. The greedy looks from the two of them made Tom feel disgusted and angry. The fury that had been building up from Wade's teasing earlier was now fully ignited. Get away from me! You two filthy scumbags! Tom erupted in rage and charged forward. Boom! The man and woman were sent flying, as if struck by an invisible cart, and instantly slammed into the ground. Wade watched from behind, his eyes shining with excitement. It was true. Emotion was the key to amplifying the magic's power. All his effort in provoking Tom hadn't been in vain. Tom, equally stunned, looked at his hands, seemingly shocked that he had just used such a powerful magic. Then, he looked at Wade, his eyes gleaming with dangerous intent. At that moment, the two had just rolled and landed. The woman fainted on the spot, while the man struggled to get up. He stared at Tom in terror, then desperately tried to run toward the alley's entrance, as if a devil was chasing him. But the next second, he froze completely. He stood motionless, like a statue. Wade slowly stepped out from behind Tom. Don't get distracted during a fight, Tom. Tom looked at the man, who had silently turned into a statue, his gaze clearing up again. The confidence that had risen from his unexpected performance was immediately suppressed by Wade. "No, I still can't beat Wade, I can't turn on him yet. We should go, we've already wasted too much time," Tom urged. "Wait, Tom, things aren't over yet," Wade said, walking over to the man. He extended his right hand and snapped his fingers in front of the man. Instantly, the man's head was freed from the petrification. However, his body remained frozen, still as a statue, unable to move. "You demon! Sir Demon! Spare me! Don't eat me! I'm not ready to die!" The man was crying and begging, tears streaming down his face. Just a moment ago, Tom had sent him flying with magic, and now his body was frozen like a statue. Such supernatural phenomena, if they hadn't driven him mad, could only mean he had quite a bit of courage. "Shut up, or I'll keep you a statue for the rest of your life," Wade said coldly. The man immediately shut his mouth. When he had been petrified earlier, he could still feel everything. The sensation of being able to feel everything but unable to move at all was terrifying. He didn't want to experience that again, let alone be stuck like that for the rest of his life. Wade asked expressionlessly, "Tell me, where's your hideout? Who's your boss? How many kids do you have? And where is your money hidden?" Tom suddenly understood. "So you want to rob them, hey? I'm trying to save people. This is doing good deeds," Wade replied. "You're talking nonsense. If you wanted to save people, why ask about the money? You clearly want to rob them," Tom retorted. "Tom, do you ever pay attention to the situation when you speak?" Chapter 12, For Money No, For Saving People. Wade and Tom hid in a dark corner, observing a well-kept small house not far ahead, complete with a nice little garden in front. It was clear that the people living here were not lacking in money. But according to the confession, the other trapped children were locked inside. Tom wrapped himself tighter in his worn jacket. "I still don't understand why we're delaying going to Diagon Alley for money. I want to see the magical world." "I've told you, it's not for the money," Wade replied irritably. He was doing this to accumulate merit points for doing good deeds. Robbing from robbers was just a side effect, of course. He couldn't explain this to Tom. "If it's not for money, then what is it for? Are you really doing this to save people? I can't see that you have such a good heart. Honestly, Tom, besides being a little strict with you, when have I not had a good heart with others?" Tom closed his mouth. This bastard seemed to be right. The thing was, Wade had only ever bullied him, so Tom had developed the false impression that Wade was never a good person. In fact, to others, Wade, who had taught him a lesson for being a bully, was actually a good person. "Forget it, I'll be honest with you. What you're saying isn't entirely wrong. Besides saving people, part of the reason is indeed for money." Wade turned and looked at Tom. "The money Dumbledore gave us definitely isn't much. It should just barely be enough for us. This means, a lot of things we'll have to buy second-hand, and there will be many things we can't afford. Are you really okay with using second-hand textbooks left by others, wearing second-hand robes that others no longer want, using second-hand wands that have been used up by others? Well, these aren't the most important things. The important thing is Dumbledore said we can only use second-hand textbooks. What does that mean? It means spellbooks are definitely not cheap in the wizarding world. We need knowledge, Tom, knowledge beyond just textbooks. Don't you want to get stronger?" Tom couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement when he heard the last two sentences. Indeed, he could tolerate a poor quality of life. After all, he had lived like that in the orphanage for so many years. But when it came to increasing his power, he couldn't just settle for that. Also, although we don't know much about Hogwarts, one thing is for sure, everyone at that school has special abilities, just like us. In other words, we won't be the most special ones there. If we still look like a bunch of poor beggars, what do you think will happen?" Tom's heart skipped a beat upon hearing this. Putting himself in others' shoes, as a seasoned bully, he understood this kind of mindset better than anyone. Being isolated by ordinary people didn't bother Tom in the slightest. After all, they couldn't bully him. But this was a magic school. The power he had, others had it too. Tom wasn't afraid of being bullied by ordinary people, but by other young wizards. At that moment, after Wade's persistent persuasion and Tom's serious underestimation of his own strength, he actually started to worry. In fact, he was really worried that the other students might be as strong as Wade. Out here, your identity is something you give yourself. So, we need money first, Wade continued to intensify his persuasion. But Dumbledore said we can't use magic on ordinary people. Tom hesitated slightly. Tom was still unsure. After all, with the combined pressure from both Wade and Dumbledore, Tom had become much more cautious and not as confident as before. Wade extended a finger and said, "First, they intended to traffic us, right?" Tom nodded. "So, I say we were acting in self-defense. Do you agree?" Tom nodded again. Wade then extended a second finger. "Second, from what we've heard from those people, there are other children trapped, right?" Tom nodded once more, this time with a smile. "So we're saving people. It has nothing to do with money." Wade smiled in satisfaction. "You've already learned how to answer quickly." "You're right, Wade. And since we have the ability, why should we live miserably?" Tom's gaze became determined. Wade patted Tom's shoulder, delighted. "You've even learned to think more broadly." A flicker of red light passed through Tom's eyes. Based on Dumbledore's behavior, he should be a good old man. So, even if he knows what we've done, considering the 2 points we've discussed, he won't blame us. At most, he'll just say we were too reckless. Wade continued, "But we can't avoid the risk because those traffickers even have corrupt cops as cover. Calling the police won't be effective, so we have to do it ourselves." Tom nodded. "The reasons are sufficient, so let's rescue the people first. Once we've rescued them, even if the so-called Ministry of Magic Dumbledore talks about finds out, we'll have an explanation. And these bastards actually plan to kidnap me and sell me? They must pay the price." Tom's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light once again. In fact, Tom was someone who held grudges. If he couldn't take on Wade, could he not handle a bunch of ordinary muggles? "What do you plan to do?" Tom then asked. "Actually, first, I need to figure out how many people are inside, and whether they have weapons like guns," Wade said seriously. Although he knew magic now, he still had a deep fear of muggle weapons guns. He couldn't just charge in head first. After all, he had only started learning magic a little over a week ago, and he wasn't as powerful as someone like Dumbledore. His available methods were quite limited. "Tom, you can control snakes, right?" Wade asked, smiling. Tom's face turned red. He had indeed once used a snake to spy on Wade's secrets about becoming stronger. "I understand," Tom said, then retreated into the corner, crouching down and making a hissing sound with his mouth. Tom could speak Parseltongue, meaning he could not only talk to snakes but also command them. This meant that many things humans found inconvenient could be done by snakes instead. Soon, Wade noticed, from the crack in the corner, green grass snakes began to poke their heads out, and there were even many venomous snakes among them. The sight of so many snake heads made the hairs on Wade's neck stand on end. But Tom seemed completely unfazed by the scene. "Hiss hiss." Tom lowered his head and gave instructions to one of the smaller snakes on the ground. Afterward, the small snake turned around, slithered off in a winding path, and disappeared into the shadows. Chapter 13, "Look, I knew you were a bully too." So, there are 5 adults inside, all male. It's possible there are others who went out and haven't returned yet. We haven't found any guns, but there are plenty of weapons like machetes. Tom drew a simple floor plan on the ground, and also marked the positions of the men on it. "Are there any children locked inside?" Wade asked. "Yes, all of them are locked on the ground floor, in this small room on the left. There are 8 children in total." Tom pointed to the smallest room on the floor plan. "A room this small, with 8 kids inside monsters," Wade frowned. Tom didn't comment on this, but hurriedly said, "I suggest we let the snakes go in first and attack. They'll panic, and then we can slip in and finish it quickly. It's getting late, and we still need to go to Diagon Alley today." "All right, let's do it," Wade said without saying anything more. He and Tom then slipped through the alley and circled to the back of the house. There, they found a back door, but it was locked. Tom handed Wade a stone. "When things start to get chaotic inside, we'll smash the lock and rush in." Wade gave Tom a glance and casually threw the stone. "Why did you throw the stone?" Tom asked, confused. "Tom, we're wizards." Wade gently waved his right hand over the door lock. Click. The lock was silently unlocked. The book had a detailed section on unlocking spells. Tom stared in shock at the lock that had been opened so cleanly and quickly. You actually know how to do this? I just figured it out on my own, Wade said vaguely. Let's get started. Tom didn't ask any more questions and immediately began issuing orders in Parseltongue. Soon, Wade began hearing the rustling sounds around them. Then, snakes began emerging from the surrounding grass, roof edges, and sewer, and quickly slithered through the door and window cracks. After a while, Wade and Tom heard frantic screams coming from inside. Now's our chance. Wade and Tom pushed the door open and rushed inside. A few minutes later, Tom crouched down on the ground, removing a grass snake from a man's face who was lying on the floor. Poke poke. He poked at the man's stiff face with his finger. So how did you manage to do that? He hadn't really done much, and yet all these people were turned into statues by Wade. I just figured it out. Maybe I just happened to hit some kind of petrifying attack spell by chance. Wade said this while pulling a large bundle of cash from a small box. This was the money box he had just found. So, this money can really be exchanged for wizard money? Wizard money is definitely different from the ones we've seen before, Tom said as he hurriedly tied up the frozen human traffickers with rope. Don't worry, it can definitely be exchanged. Our existence proves that not all wizards come from wizard families. This means there must be places where you can exchange currency, and besides, Wade said as he turned the small box to show Tom. Even if the paper money can't be exchanged, these can definitely be exchanged. Tom looked up and saw that the bottom of the small box was packed with more than a dozen small gold bars. Gold is always hard currency, no matter where it is. Tom looked at Wade with a strange expression. You really know a lot. Cough cough, I've read quite a few books in the past anyway. Enough about money, let's not forget the real purpose of us coming here. Wade said this while stuffing the money box into a bag and slinging it over his shoulder. I thought you had forgotten, Tom said sarcastically. In his mind, Wade was never a good person, he just had better acting skills than Tom. This time, they said they were here to save people, but in reality, they were just here for the money. Of course, I haven't forgotten. You should get your snakes out of here, though. Don't scare the other kids, they're not like us. Wade was in a good mood and didn't mind Tom's sarcastic words. In fact, for Wade, aside from a large sum of money, theoretically, there would also be a substantial amount of merit points to be gained. The two of them arrived at the small room at the corner of the ground floor. The room was small, but the door was made of iron and appeared very sturdy, with an exaggeratedly large lock hanging on it. As Wade approached the iron door, he could faintly hear frantic voices from behind it. Clearly, the commotion outside had been heard by the people inside. Wade placed his hand on the lock. Tom stared intently at his hand, hoping to figure out some method. However, click. Tom couldn't discern anything, and the lock was simply opened. Creak. The heavy iron door was opened, and a foul smell hit them. Tom disgustedly covered his nose and stepped aside. Wade looked into the room behind the door. Inside the dark room, 7 or 8 children were huddled in the corner, staring at the door in fear. You're safe now. Hurry and get out of here. Wade shouted. The 7 or 8 children looked at each other but didn't move. Seeing this, Wade's face turned stern. Get out here right now, and line up. Otherwise, I'll hit you. As soon as he finished speaking, the 7 or 8 children quickly rushed out. Tom looked at Wade with a face that clearly said, I knew it, you're just a bully too. Shut it, Tommy boy. Wade looked at the children, now standing in a line and trembling. He took some money out of his pocket and handed some to them. Look, those human traffickers have been taken down by my people. You're free now, hurry and leave. The children finally noticed that the cruel human traffickers who had captured them earlier were now all tied up like dumplings. Only then did they truly believe Wade's words. Of course, aside from the fact that the adults Wade mentioned were not in the room, which was a little odd. By the way, I need to ask you one more thing. Are all the people here? Wade asked again. Sir. We're still missing 1 man and 1 woman, a skinny little boy said, speaking up courageously. Oh, is it a tall, strong man and a hoarse-voiced woman? At that, the other children nodded. Well, then it's all done. Wade glanced at their curious eyes, then continued, they've already been caught. You all should hurry and go. If you can, report this case to the police and have them arrest these guys. The children nodded eagerly, muttering their thanks. Then, they took the money Wade had given them and left the hideout. Ding! Detected that the host has dismantled a human trafficking den. Rewarding the host with 1000 merit points. Ding! Detected that the future Dark Lord has performed a good deed due to the host's advice, and his life trajectory has slightly changed. Rewarding the host with 100 merit points. Wade looked at the 1400 merit points displayed Indiana his balance and felt a great sense of satisfaction. Alright, we should leave now. We still have to go to Diagon Alley. Tom urged. Wade waved his hand. Don't worry, Tom. This time we have money for transportation, don't we? Boom. Before Wade could finish his sentence, the floor of the room suddenly shook violently. Wade quickly grabbed onto the nearby sofa. Tom, who wasn't prepared, was shaken and ended up sitting down hard on the floor. Boom, boom, the ground trembled again. Tom's eyes widened in shock. It feels like something is coming out from beneath the ground. Chapter 14, it says its name is Nagini. Tom had just finished speaking when Wade felt the ground suddenly become unstable. It was clear that the ground was about to collapse. At the very moment the ground began to collapse, Wade swiftly moved his hands through a simple gesture and silently recited a spell that he had learned from the book. Seismic halt. Boom. The entire living room floor cracked in half, as if it were broken like a piece of chocolate, instantly splitting in two. Wade and Tom both fell through the crack. Fortunately, Wade's seismic spell was cast just in time, so neither of them broke their legs from the fall. Ah! What just happened? Ugh! It stinks so much! Tom roared angrily. Then Tom couldn't speak anymore, as the foul stench hit him, choking him and making it difficult to breathe, let alone curse. Wade covered his nose and looked around. The dust from the collapsed floor was slowly dissipating. The faint light from above illuminated the surroundings just a little, but farther away, it was still pitch black. However, this was enough for Wade to realize where they were. They had fallen into the sewers. Kali Jitsaeli. Wade muttered the incantation and cast a bubble head charm on both himself and Tom. Transparent bubbles appeared over their heads, successfully blocking out the foul stench from the sewers. Tom, surprised, touched the transparent bubble on his head and looked at Wade with a complicated expression. Is this another one of your made-up spells? Tom's voice sounded muffled from within the bubble, giving it a hollow tone. Now's not the time for that, Tom, Wade said, keeping a wary eye on the surroundings. Tom closed his mouth and remained silent. On one hand, Wade's ability to create his own spells made him feel defeated and unwilling to speak. On the other hand, they were both in danger. Anyone, or anything, capable of collapsing the ground like that was definitely not something easy to deal with. Rustle, rustle, rustle. Amidst the swirling dust, a strange sound suddenly echoed. Feeling extremely uneasy, Tom couldn't help but speak up, maybe we should hurry and run. Swoosh. However, before he could finish his sentence, a massive snake's head suddenly shot out of the dark shadow ahead. The grotesque snake's head opened its enormous mouth, its sharp fangs clearly visible, and lunged toward Tom's head with a terrifying snap. Caught off guard, Tom was frozen in fear, his legs like they were cast in iron, unable to move an inch. He could only watch helplessly as the snake's head lunged toward him. Protego. Bang! The grotesque snake's head was suddenly forced back half a meter by Wade's blocking spell. Tom! Stop standing there like an idiot! Say something! Wade shouted loudly. Hey? Say what? Just moments ago, Tom had nearly lost his life from the snake's attack, and now he had temporarily lost the ability to think. So, he completely failed to react to Wade's words. After all, he was just a child. At that moment, the giant snake shook its head and charged again. Bang! Another obstacle spell struck the snake's head, forcing it back once more. Tom! Talk to it! Wade shouted as he cast a petrification spell. But the usually successful petrification spell, when cast on the giant snake, was deflected by its dark green scales. However, with the extra time from the deflection, Tom finally snapped out of his stupor. Tom activated his Parcel Tongue ability once again. Parcel Tongue had a controlling effect on serpents, and sure enough, it worked this time. The giant snake, upon hearing Tom's words, indeed stopped its attack. However, even though it didn't continue its assault, it still tilted its head and kept observing the two human children in front of it. What did it say to you? Wade asked, keeping a wary eye on the snake as he turned to Tom. Tom furrowed his brows. It didn't say anything. Then what did you say? I commanded it to leave. But it isn't. At this moment, the giant snake, flicking its massive tongue, was quietly staring at them. I think maybe we should leave first, Wade suggested. I agree, Tom said for the first time, fully agreeing with Wade's suggestion. But why didn't it follow the command? Maybe you're still too weak now. Would you listen to someone weaker than you? Although Wade's words were blunt and struck a blow to Tom's young pride, he had no intention of dwelling on it further at this moment. As the two were trying to figure out how to leave the area. Hiss! The giant snake suddenly launched another attack. Wade cast another obstacle curse at its head, but this time, the effect was much weaker than before. It only knocked the snake's head slightly off course, and its sharp fangs scraped against Wade's shoulder, biting into the ground. Tom, his face pale, again used parcel tongue to command the snake. Hiss, hiss, hiss! I command you to retreat. A trace of mockery flashed in the snake's eyes. It raised its head, seemingly preparing to launch a second attack. Wade's heart sank. In such a narrow place like the sewer, there was no way to escape from such a giant snake. It seemed that only the option of either fighting to the death or breaking the net remained. However, this giant snake's magic resistance seemed absurdly high. Not to mention the lack of a wand. Wade was ready to fight with all his might. He had no choice, his time learning magic was still too short. If he had just one more week to study, he wouldn't have been forced into a situation where he had to fight for his life. At that moment, the giant snake suddenly stopped moving, then began shaking violently. Hiss! Seeing the snake in front of them suddenly thrashing around, desperately hissing as if possessed, Tom looked at Wade in confusion. Did you do this? If I had that ability, would I still need to run away? Stop asking. Let's go now. As long as we get to the surface, we'll be safe. Wait. Suddenly, Tom grabbed Wade and turned to look at the giant snake, his face full of shock. What's wrong? It spoke. It spoke? What did it say? Wade furrowed his brow. The snake must have said something that shocked Tom, otherwise, Tom who valued his life so much wouldn't have stopped like this. It says we should run quickly. It has temporarily controlled itself. Tom looked at Wade in confusion. Wade turned his head to look at the giant snake. Indeed, the snake's trembling body had stabilized, but its eyes had become much clearer, completely devoid of the ferocity from before. Tom, ask it what its name is, Wade said, looking at the snake thoughtfully. Tom gave Wade a strange look but still did as he was told. A moment later, Tom said, it says its name is Nagini. Chapter 15, Diagon Alley. Wade and Tom silently walked along the muddy streets of London. Tom, still shaken, adjusted his newsboy cap, surprised that the large hat hadn't been left behind in the sewer. Wade, on the other hand, tightened the strap of the bag where he had hidden the money, silently thankful that the gold hadn't been lost. The snake said it used to be a human woman, drawn to me by my parcel tongue heritage, but how is that possible? Tom broke the silence after a moment, still recovering. Tom, you have to admit, there are many magical things in this world. Just because we don't know about them doesn't mean they don't exist, Wade said calmly. In fact, Wade knew the story of Nagini very well, but he couldn't explain it to Tom, as he couldn't explain why he knew these things. Nagini had once been a kind and gentle woman, but unfortunately, she was a blood-cursed beast. Due to a blood curse inherited through her matrilineal family line, she was born with the curse, able to shift between human and serpent forms. However, as she grew older, the curse would eventually strip her of her humanity, erasing all memories of being human, and she would ultimately become a beast. Of course, the Nagini now wasn't the ferocious giant snake turned Horcrux by Voldemort decades later. Wade speculated that Nagini was likely on the verge of completely becoming a beast, only occasionally regaining her consciousness. And just now, it was Nagini's true consciousness that had awakened in time during a critical moment. Tom remained silent for a while before saying, I have a feeling I will meet her again in the future. Wade looked at Tom, surprised to see a fleeting look of pity in his eyes. Maybe, but we need to get stronger, or next time, you might end up getting swallowed by her, Wade said as he jumped onto a tram that had just stopped. Tom hurriedly followed him. Since they didn't have to walk, they arrived at their destination quickly. Wade noticed that the pedestrians ahead of them were taking a strange detour. Beside that detour hung a tattered sign, the Leaky Cauldron. Wade and Tom exchanged a glance before quickly walking over. Tom nervously patted the dust off his clothes. After their ordeal in the sewers, both of them looked a little disheveled. The most important thing was that there was a faint, almost imperceptible odor on them. Just as Tom began to frown, planning to find somewhere to change clothes, he suddenly felt a cool sensation sweep over him, as if a light breeze had gently brushed past. Then, he was surprised to find that the dust and odor on him had completely vanished. Tom immediately turned to look at Wade. At this moment, Wade was looking at his own clothes, silently muttering a spell in his mind, "Scour Jiffy." In the next second, Wade's entire body was spotless as well. "Wade, I've actually been meaning to ask you for a while, did you always know that you were a..." Tom glanced around, making sure no one was paying attention, before continuing in a lowered voice, "Did you always know you were a wizard and that you had somehow learned the method of using magic?" "No, I figured it out through experimentation. Haven't you realized by now that the power of magic is purely a matter of the mind?" Tom's suspicion didn't surprise Wade, but of course, he wouldn't admit it. In fact, even without getting the spellbook, he could still figure out many magical effects through experimentation. "Magic is a matter of the mind." Tom repeated the phrase, deep in thought. "All right, we should go in now. A new world is beckoning us." Wade patted Tom's shoulder and led the way into the leaky cauldron. The interior of the leaky cauldron was exactly as Wade expected, dirty and cramped. However, despite the unkempt surroundings, the bar was still bustling with activity, though the patrons seemed to have quite varied backgrounds. Wade approached the bar, where a balding middle-aged man was polishing a glass. "Hello, where do we enter Diagon Alley?" Wade asked. The middle-aged man put down the glass and looked up at Wade and Tom. "Oh, you must be the new Hogwarts students this year, right? Never been to Diagon Alley? All right, follow me." Tom and Wade exchanged a glance and followed him. Along the way, several people greeted the man. "Tom, is there any food left? Get me a piece of flatbread. I'm so hungry I could eat a whole cow. Oh, and get me a glass of sherry too. Please wait, calm, I still need to take these two freshmen to Diagon Alley." "Oh? Are they muggle-born little wizards?" "Yes, yes." As they spoke, the owner of the leaky cauldron, also named Tom, led Wade and the other Tom to a small courtyard behind the bar. Tom, trying to hide his discomfort, asked the owner, also named Tom, "What does muggle-born mean?" It seems the professor who explained things to you didn't clarify it properly. A muggle is a term used for people who don't understand magic. A muggle-born is a wizard born into a muggle family. Aren't you two muggle-born? If you were from a wizarding family, you wouldn't have never been to Diagon Alley, the owner Tom said, eyeing the two boys with suspicion. "No, we are indeed muggle-born. We were just curious about what the term muggle means," Wade explained. "Oh, I see." Owner Tom didn't pay it much thought, then turned and took out his wand, pointing it at the wall where a trash can was. "From this trash can, count 3 blocks up, then count 2 blocks horizontally, and then knock." Clink! The next moment, the brick wall quickly moved, and the bricks jumped to the side, revealing an entrance in front of the three. Wade was the first to step into the entrance, and a cobblestone-paved street appeared before his eyes. What immediately caught his eye were the various strangely shaped shops on either side of the street and the bustling crowd in the streets. Diagon Alley was lively and vibrant. "All right, now you know how to enter and exit Diagon Alley, I should head back. Oh, and don't stray off the main street. Otherwise, if you accidentally walk into Nocturne Alley, it could be dangerous," warned owner Tom before he left. As the entrance behind them returned to a wall, Tom suddenly said, "I don't think I'm muggle-born. I think my father must have been a wizard, and my mother wasn't. Otherwise, she wouldn't have so easily died in front of the orphanage." "Yet. About that? Well, no matter what, we're both from the orphanage now, so we can be considered muggle-born," Wade replied. "All right, but sooner or later, I'll find out about my father." Tom took out the shopping list and didn't mention his father again. "So, what should we buy first?" "Of course, the first thing we need to buy is a wand. But we need to exchange some money first," Wade said, patting his backpack. Several kilometers away from the leaky cauldron, in front of a small detached house, a crowd of police officers had gathered. The 2-story house had already started to lean and seemed like it could collapse at any moment. "Chief, we found those kidnapped human traffickers, but what?" The police chief, who had a pair of mustaches, asked. Well, the floor of the house collapsed for some reason, and several of the traffickers fell down and got injured. Also, they seem to have gone mad with fear. That's really strange. Among the crowd, a tall and thin man suddenly stepped forward. The nearby police officers acted as though they didn't see him, allowing him to walk into the unstable building. Dumbledore furrowed his brows as he observed the grim scene inside the building. His brow tightened. He closed his eyes and carefully felt the surroundings because he realized the magical traces in the area felt strangely familiar. Suddenly, Dumbledore opened his eyes, a look of confusion on his face. It's them? How could it be them? A trace of worry flashed across Dumbledore's face, and then he jumped down into the sewer through the large hole. Ignoring the stench of the sewer, Dumbledore carefully investigated the area. Suddenly, he bent down and rummaged through a corner of the sewer. When he stood up, he had a dark green scale in his hand. This is Nagini. Has she truly fallen completely? Wait. If they encountered Nagini? Dumbledore's expression grew more worried as he put the scale into his pocket. Snap! Dumbledore's figure vanished into the sewer. Chapter 16, Dumbledore must have his reasons for doing this. On their way to the Wizarding Bank, Gringotts Tom had his eyes wide open. The shops on both sides of the street were selling things that he had never seen before. There were shops selling owls, others selling various strange magical potion ingredients, some selling cauldrons, and even shops selling flying brooms. What surprised Tom was that there was even an ice cream shop here. As they passed by a store named Mr. Muggin's Robes, Wade suddenly stopped. What's wrong? Aren't we going to the Wizarding Bank to exchange money? Tom asked, somewhat confused. In fact, he was already impatient to explore these shops, so exchanging money was the most important thing to him right now. We need to buy 2 proper sets of clothes, Wade said. Of course, but we should exchange money first, shouldn't we? Tom frowned and said. He didn't quite understand why Wade was talking nonsense. When we asked where the bank was earlier, that gentleman told us the Wizarding Bank is called Gringotts and is run by goblins, right? That's right. He also said that goblins are very greedy creatures, right? Yes. Then what do you think will happen if we go to Gringotts, dressed like this, to exchange gold? Wade asked. Tom looked at his clothes. Although they looked clean, they were old, and many parts were patched up. Then Tom understood the key issue. Ah! You mean, those goblins will see us looking like this, and since we don't look like wealthy people, they'll suspect that our gold is from illegitimate sources and take the opportunity to undercut us. Wade nodded. Exactly, Tom. You know, this gold wasn't easy to come by, and I don't want to let those greedy goblins get it for cheap. Indeed, it hadn't been easy at all. They had almost lost their lives when they encountered the beastly Nagini. You make a good point. Tom's face became serious. Let's go, we need some clothes. I just hope our money is enough. You know, Dumbledore only gave us 20 galleons each. Wade smiled. Don't worry, leave it to me. I guarantee I'll get us 2 good sets of clothes. Tom looked at Wade in confusion. You don't mean you're planning to steal, do you? You think I'm like you? Always ready to steal at the slightest disagreement. Humph. Tom rolled his eyes at this remark and led the way into the shop. Clink, clink. As soon as the door was pushed open, a bell above the door rang. Welcome, you 2 charming young gentlemen. Are you looking to buy your school uniforms? A tall man with gold-rimmed glasses, a small mustache, and wearing a luxurious tailcoat smiled at them. He looked as though he had just come from some grand banquet. Actually, we'd like to buy 2 sets of good clothes first, and then come back later for the school uniforms, Tom said. Oh, the man looked them over. You 2 really should get new clothes. The outfits you're wearing now don't quite match your looks. Leave it to me, I'll take care of it for you. Well, I just want to mention that we don't have much money right now, Tom said anxiously. After all, they couldn't just pull out the gold bars and use them directly. With their current appearance, it would be too strange if they were carrying gold bars. I understand, kids. No need to worry, I know what I'm doing. I've been doing business in Diagon Alley for many years. I've seen many kids in your situation. The clothes I'm recommending are definitely within your budget. The man quickly pulled Tom over, and a few measuring tapes flew over. To Tom's surprise, they automatically started measuring him. You're Mr. Mogan Malkin, right? Wade suddenly asked. Yes, kid, there's my sign outside, Mr. Mogan replied warmly. Well then sir, could I try on this outfit? Wade politely asked as he stood in front of a set of clothes that looked quite expensive. Mr. Mogan stroked his little mustache. This outfit is quite pricey, kid. Can I rent it? I'd like to rent it for 2 hours, and the rental fee is negotiable. Also, here's the deposit. Wade said as a small gold bar appeared in his hand. Tom's eyes widened when he saw Wade take out the gold bar, staring at him as if he were looking at a fool. If I could just casually pull out a gold bar like that, I'd take care of it myself. Why do I need you? Mr. Mogan took the gold bar, carefully examined it, then looked at Wade in surprise. This is real gold. I thought you were joking with me. But this gold bar is worth far more than this outfit. Do you really trust me this much? What if I? Since Mr. Mogan has been in business in Diagon Alley for so many years, his reputation is naturally unquestionable. Besides, we are actually doing a task for Professor Dumbledore. Where else would the gold come from? Wade said calmly. Mr. Mogan suddenly understood. Ah. So it's a task for Professor Dumbledore. I get it. Haha, another one of those peculiar little tests, hey. Yeah, he says he sees huge potential in the two of us. Can't believe we are stuck doing some random tasks for him. Haha, I've heard that he likes to give his students all sorts of strange little tests. So it's true. Since it's for Professor Dumbledore, forget about the deposit. You can take the gold back. I'll pick out 2 fitting sets for you right away. Upon hearing Dumbledore's name, the last bit of doubt in Mr. Mogan's heart was completely dispelled, and the source of the gold was easily explained. The famous Dumbledore couldn't spare a few gold coins? As for the little test, the task that had nothing to do with Mr. Mogan, Dumbledore must have had his reasons for doing this. After both of them changed into their expensive new outfits and walked out, Tom was still a bit dazed. Wade suddenly laughed and said, Tom, did you notice? What? As long as it's something related to Professor Dumbledore, no matter how strange or unusual it is, people always accept it quickly. Tom sighed. Maybe it's because he's usually so crazy? But then again, he doesn't seem like that. Besides, can a crazy person really be a professor? However, as Tom recalled his first meeting with Dumbledore, with that exaggerated outfit, he suddenly thought it made sense. All right, I just hope Dumbledore hasn't found out that you're doing this under his name, Tom said, a bit worried. He still vividly remembered the scene where Dumbledore burned his wardrobe. He was afraid that if they got caught, Wade might drag him down with him. No, Tom, you're wrong. Wade shook his finger repeatedly. He pointed at himself, then at Tom. It should be the two of us, doing things under his name together. After all, you're wearing the clothes too. Wade deliberately emphasized the word together. Tom's forehead twitched with veins bulging. You bastard! He had accidentally been dragged onto the boat again. Wade, tisk. Tisk. Tommy boy, your vocabulary for swearing is a bit lacking. If you need help, I could actually teach you. Get lost. Chapter 17, Gringotts Wizarding Bank. Gringotts was the tallest building in Diagon Alley. Wade and Tom stood in front of the towering white structure, carefully examining it. These goblins really know how to show off, Tom said with a sneer. I've heard they control all the wealth in the wizarding world. Having an impressive facade is only natural, Wade remarked with a touch of admiration. Tom furrowed his brows. I really don't understand why wizards would entrust their wealth to another species. We'll figure that out later when we get a history book, Wade said. But for now. The two didn't delay further and quickly walked toward the large doors. Gringotts had 2 large doors. The first door was a shiny bronze one. On either side of the door stood 2 goblin guards dressed in crimson and gold-trimmed uniforms. This was the first time Wade and Tom had seen goblins. They were very short, with large heads, long ears, sharp noses, and long limbs. Wade noticed that their arms seemed to be longer than their legs. As Wade and Tom quickly examined the goblins were politely bowing to them. Probably because they had rented expensive clothes. At this moment, Wade and Tom reached the second large silver door. The silver door was engraved with a passage that resembled a poem. Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed. For those who take, but do not earn, must pay most dearly in their turn. So if you seek beneath our floors, A treasure that was never yours. Thief, you have been warned, beware of finding more than treasure there. Behind the silver door was a wide marble hall, where over 100 goblins were busy behind large counters. Some were using scales to weigh coins, some were using magnifying glasses to inspect gems, while others were attending to wizard customers and hastily jotting things down in large ledgers. After looking around, Wade walked up to a relatively idle goblin's counter. "Excuse me." The goblin, hearing the voice, put down the quill in its hand and leaned forward over the tall counter to look at Wade and Tom. At this moment, both Wade and Tom were dressed in elegant and exquisite clothing, looking like young masters from pure-blood families. The goblin, seeing their attire, immediately broke into a broad smile, which replaced the impatience it had previously shown. "Welcome. What can I do for you, gentlemen?" The goblin's voice was sharp and piercing. Wade didn't take out any pounds, instead, he directly pulled out 5 small gold bars from his pocket. "Exchange some galleons." "Ah. Of course. Of course. I'll weigh them for you right away." The goblin's eyes brightened upon seeing the gold bars, and its tone became even more ingratiating. It placed the 5 gold bars Wade handed over onto the small scale to weigh. "Oh. The purity of this gold is very high. I can offer the highest price. The current gold rate is 10 galleons per gram. Each of these 5 gold bars weighs 100 grams, so I'll offer you 5,000 galleons for the lot. How does that sound?" Tom's eyes lit up at this. Honestly, for someone like him, who only had 20 galleons to his name, 5,000 galleons was a small fortune. However, Wade shook his head. 10 galleons per gram? That's a bit too high of a fee. I think I'll go to another counter. Tom couldn't help but glance at Wade. 5,000 galleons was already a lot. "Ah, wait. Please." The goblin quickly stopped Wade, who was turning to leave. "How about this? My name is Lasso. If you agree to come back for your future business at Gringotts, I can offer you 12 galleons per gram. What do you think?" Lasso glanced around warily, then lowered his voice and continued, "How does that sound?" Tom quickly rubbed his face nonchalantly, making sure his expression didn't betray him and ruin Wade's plan. At this point, Wade pretended to hesitate. "Well, sir, although the price of gold changes daily, this is the best I can offer. If I go any higher, I won't be able to explain it to my superiors," Lasso said with a helpless tone. "All right, let's go with what you said," Wade finally agreed. "Great. I'll get the money for you right away. By the way, would you like to open a personal vault? You know, with an extra vault, you can store your own pocket money. I guarantee your family won't find out. Go ahead and open one. Also, help me deposit the rest of these," Wade said, pulling out the remaining gold bars. Lasso's eyes widened at the sight. He had indeed been right, these young masters were rich. Even their pocket money was in the form of top-notch gold bars. By the time they exited Gringotts, their wallets were bulging with money. Tom, still puzzled, asked, "How did you know that greedy goblin wasn't telling the truth?" Wade chuckled. "Greedy goblins, Tom? How could they ever tell the truth? Do you believe that 12 galleons per gram was really the highest price? Lasso surely has a cut that he's pocketing. Then why did you still deal with him?" Tom asked, shocked. "Tom, if you want someone to work hard for you, you've got to give them something in return. Especially when dealing with goblins," Wade said casually. "Here, this is for you." Wade pulled a pouch from his pocket and tossed it to Tom. It contained 500 galleons. "We'll each take 500 galleons for now. It should be enough for a while. We'll leave the rest in the vault." Tom nodded silently and placed the pouch in his pocket. "All right, we should return the clothes now. Then let's go buy a wand." Wade's face showed a hint of excitement. Wade had always used wandless magic, and now he was curious to see what it felt like to use a wand. Tom felt the same way. After returning the clothes to Mr. Magine Malkin and purchasing the required school robes, they quickly arrived in front of Ollivander's wand shop. The shop looked small and shabby, with the golden sign on the door peeling off. It read, "Ollivander's, makers of fine wands since 382 BC. In the shop window, on a faded purple cushion, sat a lone wand. Wade and Tom pushed open the door and entered. The inside of the shop was cramped, and apart from a long bench in the corner, there was nothing else. Thousands of narrow paper boxes containing wands were piled from the floor to the ceiling, with a thin layer of dust covering everything. "Welcome to Ollivander's wand shop. Ah, 2 more young wizards preparing to attend Hogwarts," said a young man with silver-white eyes, emerging from among the crowded shelves. "My name is Garrick Ollivander. You've come to the right place to buy a wand," the young man said with a smile. "With so many wands, how do we choose?" Tom looked around, puzzled, at the piles of wand boxes surrounding them. Ollivander laughed. "Haha, in fact, it's not the wizard who chooses the wand, but the wand that chooses the wizard. Now which one of you will go first?" Wade pushed Tom forward. "He goes first." Tom frowned and glanced at Wade. He was beginning to suspect that Wade had something devious in mind again. However, this time, Wade truly had no intention of tricking him. He simply wanted to see if Tom would end up with that fated wand, the one made of yew and affixed with a phoenix feather core. Note: in British measurement units, it's a bit more complicated, so I just switched back to grams, as it looks more convenient. Chapter 18, Harry Potter's Wand. Tom stood numbly in place, letting the measuring tapes automatically assess his measurements. Meanwhile, the still young Mr. Ollivander was carefully jotting down the data in a notebook. Once the measurements were done, Ollivander dove into the pile of wands. After quite a while, he finally emerged from the pile of wands, though it was clear that it had been a difficult task. He had several long boxes in his hands. Tom looked at the boxes containing the wands, a fiery gleam flashing in his eyes. "All right, we'll try them one by one. If all goes well, the wand that suits you should be among these." Ollivander placed the boxes neatly on the counter. Tom looked at the long boxes on the table and then at the countless wands filling the room. "Ollivander sir, how do you know these might suit me? What about the others?" Ollivander smiled and said, "That's a business secret. Just kidding, it's not that mysterious. These wands were selected based on the measurements I just took for you. Also, it's not just maybe suitable for you, in fact, all the wands here are suited for you." Tom asked in confusion, "All of them are suitable for me? So I just need to pick one from these?" No, no, no. I emphasize again, the wand chooses the wizard, child, so, you should stand here, try them out, and let them choose. In the end, they will decide if they want to follow you, Ollivander said as he opened the wand boxes on the table. Tom wasn't quite satisfied with this explanation. He came to buy a product, but in the end, it was the product that had to choose him. "Come on, don't just stand there." Ollivander handed Tom a black wand. "Try waving it. Ebony wood, with a phoenix feather core, 10¼ inches. A very good wand. Powerful." Tom took the wand, and his previous dissatisfaction was quickly replaced by excitement. A powerful wand? He liked wands with great power. Whoosh! Tom swung the wand forcefully. However, nothing happened. It felt like he had just swung an ordinary twig instead of a wand. "Ah, it seems this wand doesn't choose you. Let's try the next one." Ollivander put the ebony wand back into its box. Tom couldn't help but frown. Not being chosen was making him a bit frustrated. "Let's try this one." After that, Tom tried many more wands, but none of them seemed to be a good fit for him. Instead, Ollivander's shop was getting a bit messy from the explosions caused by Tom trying the wands. However, Ollivander was used to this and casually repaired the broken tables, chairs, and windows. Before long, a pile of wands had accumulated on the counter in front of Tom. A somewhat picky customer, though not very common. Ah, perhaps I shouldn't have only let you try wands with phoenix feather cores. Perhaps. While speaking, Ollivander once again dived into the pile of wands. When he reappeared, he had several wand boxes in his hands. He opened one of the boxes and took out a black wand. "This is one of my masterpieces, Hollywood, with a phoenix tail feather core, 11 inches, flexible and responsive." Wade, hearing this, couldn't help but glance at the wand. Because this seemed to be the wand of Harry Potter, Tom's future arch-nemesis. Tom took the wand and gave it a gentle wave. Boom! The violent explosion once again shattered the recently repaired glass display case into pieces. "Oh no! This is completely unsuitable for you." Ollivander quickly snatched the holly wand out of Tom's hand. This was completely different from what he had expected. Not only did this wand fail to bond with Tom, but it even produced a strong rejection reaction. After putting the holly wand away, Ollivander fell into deep thought. Tom, looking at the broken glass all over the floor, appeared somewhat at a loss. He even began to doubt himself. Could it be that his talent was really poor, and that's why it was so difficult to be chosen by a wand? Actually, if Tom hadn't met Wade, who was constantly weighing him down like a large stone, he wouldn't have had such thoughts. But now, Tom could be said to have completely lost confidence in his abilities, constantly falling into self-doubt. Suddenly, Wade's voice came from behind, "Don't worry, Tom, I think it's because you have a very special talent. That's why choosing a wand is so difficult." Hearing this, Tom's tense mood relaxed somewhat. He turned around, about to say something, only to see Wade sitting on a long bench, enjoying a cup of ice cream. Tom's mood suddenly became less pleasant. "Where did you get the ice cream?" Wade shrugged, "I just went out to buy it." "You were so focused on choosing a wand, you didn't notice me." Tom furrowed his brow. "But what about mine?" Wade blinked, "Didn't buy one. I thought you were too busy to eat right now, you know, ice cream melts." "Humph. I didn't want it anyway." Tom turned his head again. Ollivander's voice came through at that moment. "I occasionally have a few people who have difficulty choosing a wand. They all, without exception, have very special talents, but in the end, they all find the wand that suits them the most. So, don't worry, the wand that's perfect for you is still waiting. Good things take time, my dear." Ollivander said this as he took a white wand out of another box. "I thought it over carefully, and since the holly wand was so rejecting of you, why not try this one you would with a phoenix feather core, 13.5 inches, extremely powerful. Try it." Tom took the U-wand with a neutral expression. He was already somewhat numb, after all, when trying the other wands, Ollivander had said almost the same thing. Buzz. The moment Tom gripped the U-wand, a faint green light suddenly spilled from the tip of the wand, casting an eerie glow over the dark shop. "Wow!" Wade exclaimed, amazed by the scene. If he didn't know that Tom still couldn't do much magic, he would have thought that Tom had just cast the killing curse, Avada Kedavra. "Haha! This is the wand. This U-wand, just like the holly wand, has the same phoenix feather core. You could say they're brothers among wands. I was just thinking, since the holly wand rejected you so much, this U-wand was highly likely to be an unexpectedly perfect fit for you. And as it turns out, I was right. Oh, the U-wand! I'm sure that you will achieve extraordinary things in the future." Ollivander looked excited as well, since rare scenes like this were not something he often witnessed. Tom stared blankly at the U-wand in his hand, feeling that blood connection. It felt as if his arm had been extended. This realization greatly boosted Tom's confidence. "Humph, once I get back and practice my magic, I'll beat the crap out of that bastard Wade." Suddenly, Tom felt a slight coldness in his left hand, which wasn't holding the wand, and then a cup of ice cream appeared in his hand. "Congratulations, Tom, you've finally got the perfect wand," Wade said cheerfully. "You said you weren't buying one. Hey? You believe everything I say? When did you start trusting me this much, Tom? You bastard! Don't want it, then? Should I return it? Since it's your money, why wouldn't I eat it? Hand it over." Chapter 19, Wand Chooses the Wizard? "You sure about that?" After young Ollivander had restored the shop to its original state from the mess created by helping Tom pick out his wand, he turned to Wade. "All right, it's your turn. Is your dominant hand left or right?" "Right hand." "Okay, please stand still, I'll take your measurements." Then, the familiar process began again. After collecting the data, Ollivander dove back into the wand pile. When he came back out, he was holding 7 or 8 wand boxes in each of his hands. "Speaking of which, it's quite strange, you two are very similar. At least 5 of these are the ones that gentleman just tried." Ollivander placed the wand boxes down and looked at Wade and Tom with interest. At this point, it was Tom's turn to sit on the bench and eat his ice cream. Upon hearing Ollivander's words, Tom couldn't help but frown again. "What do you mean by that?" Tom asked. "What he means is that we share many similar traits," Wade replied. "That's right. So, some wands are suitable for both him and you," Ollivander said with a smile. Suddenly, Wade asked, "So if I use Tom's wand, would it suit me as well?" "Haha, it might suit you very well," Ollivander said cheerfully. "And no. This is my wand, don't even think about it." Tom quickly shoved the U-wand he had been holding tightly into his pocket. Don't be so stingy, Tom. What if we find ourselves in a special situation and you need to lend me your wand? Are you really not going to lend it to me? Dream on. Tom covered his pocket and fiercely dug a big scoop of ice cream, as if he were digging into Wade's skull. Haha, you two really get along well. This reminds me of a good friend of mine, Ollivander said, smiling. Tom glared at Ollivander angrily. I'm not familiar with him. Mr. Ollivander, he's still sulking over the ice cream issue, so we don't need to pay attention to him, Wade said with a smile. Ollivander remembered the matter at hand and nodded. All right then, let's try these 5 first. These are the ones your friend just tried. With that, Ollivander handed Wade a rosewood wand. Buzz. As soon as Wade gripped the wand, a dazzling white light burst from it. Ah! Very good. This wand suits you perfectly. Ollivander said with joy. He hadn't expected that, after Tom had such a difficult time choosing a wand, Wade, who shared similar traits, would succeed on the very first try. Ollivander had already planned for another round of difficult battles. Tom opened his mouth, staring at Wade's back in disbelief. Why did he get chosen by the wand so quickly? Without comparison, there is no harm. Thinking back to how he had struggled for so long to finally get the right wand, Tom couldn't help but feel frustrated. However, there wasn't much excitement on Wade's face. On the contrary, he was examining the wand in his hand, seemingly lost in thought, which made Ollivander feel a bit confused. You've got the perfect wand, so why do you seem so uninterested? Ollivander couldn't help but ask. Well, this wand seems quite nice, but I just feel like it's not the perfect fit for me, Wade said, looking up. Oh, if you say that, the wand in your hand might not be pleased. Ollivander's expression became somewhat serious. After all, it's the wand that chooses the wizard, not the wizard who chooses the wand. No offense, Mr. Ollivander. I just think since it's the wand that chooses the wizard, shouldn't I give other wands a chance to observe me as well? After all, as you just said, all these wands seem quite suited for me, so it's really just about which one chooses me, isn't it? Ollivander couldn't help but nod. Well, you do have a point. Since that's the case, let's try them all. Ollivander didn't mind, as all the wands had already been brought out, so letting Wade try them wasn't an issue. Tom saw that Wade wanted to try other wands and couldn't help but roll his eyes, finishing the last bite of his ice cream. He thought Wade was just wasting time. This wand is made of black walnut with a fire dragon heartstring core. Buzz. Before Ollivander could finish his introduction, the black walnut wand that Wade had just picked up suddenly emitted a golden light. Ah! Ollivander opened his mouth in surprise, forgetting to continue his sentence. He had never seen someone experience a phenomenon with 2 wands in a row during a wand trial. To be clear, such phenomena like glowing only occur when a wizard picks up a wand that is an extremely good fit for them. But how could there be a second wand that perfectly matched a wizard? Still not quite the right feeling. May I try the third one? Wade said, handing the black walnut wand back to Ollivander. Oh, of course, Ollivander hurriedly took out the third wand. At this point, Ollivander was also very curious to see if the third wand would show any unusual signs. By now, Ollivander had forgotten to continue his usual introduction of the wands. This time, the wand did not emit any light. However, the moment Wade picked up the wand, whoosh! The wand's tip pointed directly at a wand box, which suddenly turned into a squeaking little white mouse. Oh! Merlin! This wand is actually more suitable for you than the previous 2. Ollivander exclaimed. Only then did he realize that Wade's earlier statement that the first 2 wands weren't quite right for him wasn't an exaggeration. Still not quite right, Wade returned the wax-colored wand. At this point, Ollivander had no objections. He simply continued handing over another wand. Indeed, the phenomena continued to occur. Sometimes it was light, sometimes it caused objects to change shape, sometimes it made fog appear out of nowhere in the shop, other times things floated by themselves, and once, Wade even started floating in the air himself. All of this was happening so strangely and illogically that Ollivander couldn't recover for a while. Tom had been sitting in the back, watching. As he observed the series of strange events caused by Wade, he suddenly felt that the U-wand in his pocket was not as appealing anymore. It was unclear how much time had passed, but soon a large pile of wands had accumulated on Ollivander's counter. The constant flashing lights had caused passers-by outside to think that Ollivander's shop was experiencing a thunderstorm. After a while, Wade, holding a reddish-brown wand, eagerly asked, "What material is this wand made of?" "Oh, this one is made of beechwood, with a dragon heartstring core, 12 1/3 inches, very flexible." Suddenly, Ollivander paused, as he realized in shock that the wand in Wade's hand was showing no signs of unusual phenomena at all. Wade, holding the wand, pointed it at the little white mouse that he had accidentally transformed earlier. Whoosh! The little white mouse instantly turned back into the wand box. How is this possible? This wand, in your hands, didn't show any special phenomena, but it seems to be more suited to you know. It's the most suited one so far. Ollivander felt that his previous understanding had been completely overturned. "That's because it's a bit shy, I can feel it," Wade said as he handed over the beechwood wand. "I'll take this one." "Ah, of course," Ollivander seemed a bit absent-minded. "I'm sorry for making such a mess here," Wade said. "By Merlin's beard, it's no problem at all." Ollivander finally began to regain his composure. Tom suddenly asked, "Hey, didn't you say the wand chooses the wizard? How come now it looks like he's the one choosing the wand?" "Sigh, it seems my understanding of wand lore isn't as thorough as I thought." Ollivander sighed. "The wand chooses the wizard." Ollivander glanced at Wade again and continued, "The wizard also seems to choose the wand. Merlin, I've never seen anything like this before." Chapter 20, Why buy books? Can't you just memorize them? Wade and Tom spent quite a bit of time in the wand shop. Because of Wade's performance, Ollivander was inspired by something only he could understand. The man was so overjoyed, depressed, and elated at the same time that he didn't even charge Wade and Tom for the wands. Standing at the door of the wand shop, Tom's eyes flashed with a hint of confusion. "What's going on? Now that we have money, we can't even spend it." "If you want to spend money you can help me buy what's on my list." Wade happily handed over his shopping list. "Buy your own stuff," Tom said, then turned and walked away quickly, as if something dirty was chasing him. Wade shook his head helplessly. When a kid has money, their wings get strong. After some reflection, Wade followed his shopping list and started walking through Diagon Alley step by step. It was already 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was getting late. They still had to make it back to the Wolves' orphanage before dark. Wade was moving quickly. Before long, he had a large bag of things and arrived at the Leaky Cauldron. This was the last stop for his shopping today, and also the one he had been looking forward to the most. Of course it was also the stop Tom had been most excited about. Wade had already spotted him. Tom, at this moment, was engrossed in looking at various spellbooks. However, Wade didn't approach him to disturb him, as he still had his own things to do. Glancing at the time, he felt it was still early. Wade handed the list of textbooks to the shop assistant, asking them to bring over the books he needed. The shop assistant skillfully went to gather the books for Wade. Meanwhile, Wade himself walked alone into the towering bookshelves. After searching for a while, he pulled out a book and opened it to begin reading. "We should go." Wade felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned around and saw Tom. At that moment, the last rays of the setting sun filtered into the bookstore through the door, and it was already quite late. Wade quickly finished reading the last few pages of the book in his hand, then, together with Tom, they made their way to the counter. Their textbooks had already been packed and were waiting there. Next to Tom's pile of textbooks, there was a stack of other books, which were likely the additional books he planned to buy. "I think I selected too much." Tom frowned at the large pile of books and various bags, feeling a bit overwhelmed. "Could you help us send these books to our place?" Wade asked politely. "There's too much for us to carry." "Of course. Please write down your address." The shop assistant smiled as they handed over a pen and paper. "Can you send all of these together?" Wade asked, presenting the rest of their items to the shop assistant. "Sure, but since these aren't from our store, there will be a small handling fee." "That's fine." Wade readily agreed, as the small fee was nothing to worry about. After writing down their address, the two of them walked out of the Leighton bookstore empty-handed. Apart from their wands, everything they had purchased today was being sent to them. "Didn't you buy any other books?" Tom asked, looking at Wade with confusion. He had noticed earlier that, aside from the required school textbooks, Wade hadn't bought any other books. Tom was well aware of Wade's character. Just like him, Wade was extremely eager for power. How could he possibly skip buying books on spells to enhance his abilities? "I bought a lot of magic automatic sketch pens. And a lot of parchment," Wade said cheerfully. "Why would you buy those things?" Tom asked, still puzzled. Wade raised an eyebrow and asked in return, I've already memorized the books I'm interested in. I can just transcribe them when I get back. Why would I need to buy them? Tom didn't believe a single word Wade said, not even the punctuation. What Tom didn't know was that Wade wasn't exaggerating, he really did have the ability to memorize everything he saw. Wade glanced at the clock in a nearby shop, then sighed. Instead of obsessing over this, maybe you should think about how you are going to explain this to Mrs. Cole. We've been missing for a whole 12 hours. Tom's face instantly changed at those words. You're not planning to tell her that I dragged you out for a whole day of fun, are you? Wade blinked. Isn't that so? You were the one who suggested sneaking out this morning. And, I'm a good kid, you know, do you think Mrs. Cole will believe you or believe me? Damn it. If you hadn't tried to play dirty, we would have been back already. So what? Didn't you spend the money we earned? Those books you bought in Flourish and Blots were 1 or 2 galleons each. If you hadn't come with me, would you have bought so many? You bastard. Honestly, you've gotten all these benefits. Shouldn't you take a little responsibility and take the blame? You can't just eat for free, right? Eat for free? Didn't I do anything? When we raided the human traffickers' hideout, who brought the snakes? Ah, right, and then you brought Nagini, almost losing your life, right? Are you shameless? That was your plan in the first place. I don't care about that. I was dragged out by you to sneak off. You don't actually think I'm scared of that old cat, do you? Then take the blame. No. I refuse. Then. Aren't you afraid of me? You fine, you're ruthless. The two of them bickered and walked back. By the time they reached the orphanage, it was completely dark outside. After walking so far, Tom felt like his legs didn't belong to him anymore. However, Wade, walking beside him, didn't seem tired at all. They had walked several kilometers, and yet Wade still looked full of energy. How come you're not tired at all? Tom panted. He had never walked such a long distance in one go before. Well, I bought some temporary strength-enhancing potions. You know what potions are, right? They're the kind of... I know what they are. Tom replied irritably, why didn't you remind me so I could buy some too? Seems like someone didn't want to walk with me, so how could I ask? I had to buy it myself. Tom felt like his lungs were about to explode with frustration. He actually wanted to retort, but he was in the wrong, and he couldn't argue back at all. Just as he was about to draw his wand, thinking of taking out his frustration on Wade, a familiar voice suddenly came from the shadows. It seems you two have been busy today, the voice said. Both Wade and Tom stopped talking, as if they were hit by a silence spell. Dumbledore slowly emerged from the shadows, his scrutinizing gaze falling on the two children. Tom felt a chill run through his veins. He truly hated this feeling. Good evening, Professor Dumbledore. What a coincidence, running into you here. Wade broke the silence. He glanced at the orphanage gate behind Dumbledore. Clearly, this wasn't a coincidence. Dumbledore had definitely been waiting for them here.
Thanks for listening.